I think like we could
Thank you
start
for
'cause
follow Ron.
we were just talking like before stream when we were doing our test, like how we got into leftism. I think that's like a fun place to start because for me it's kind of like a logical conclusion kind of. I would say like over the last like maybe 4 years I've shifted more towards leftism. I've always been more left leaning in general, but definitely in my younger age more of a lib, like more liberal in my sensibilities and like not being very critical of capitalism as is, but like very pro minorities, that kind of stuff, but not really critical of the economic organization that we have in our world. But then started watching stuff like Philosophy Tube, H Bomber Guy, ContraPoints, so like YouTuber leftist video essayists. Like I think it was around like 4 years ago, watching them, and then slowly like seeing how the world is becoming more and more like unequal. Rich people are getting richer while poor people are getting poorer, and the gap is just growing and growing and growing. And I think the kind of final straw that really pushed me further is like the past year of COVID. Like that has just shown how unequal it really is. Billionaires have made great bank during the last year from COVID, while most people are suffering.
Yeah, 100%. And it's definitely like I was telling you earlier, that has definitely amplified my ideologies as well. So my perspective kind of comes from, I guess, from my upbringing. I was raised in a very hyper conservative, very very religious environment, but the interesting thing about that is I lived in an area that was very diverse and very economically disadvantaged. So growing up, I saw firsthand, in my own life and in the people that my neighbors in my community, the struggles that people go through every day to just get by, to just get work. You see people working 40 plus hours a week, multiple jobs, 50, 60 hours a
Mm-hmm.
week, 3 jobs, trying to care for an entire family, barely able to afford transportation, and then seemingly all these systems in place to prevent them from acquiring things like transportation and things that would allow them to work and to make a livelihood for themselves. And it started to not make sense for me, around middle school and high school. I'm like, it really doesn't seem like the people that my community that I'm growing up and interacting with more tends to like really help the people that actually live in my physical community where I live.
Mm.
So that kind of turned me, it's kind of the same way as you, into a more liberal perspective in high school, early college, and then recently over the pandemic, I have seen the failures of basically all institutions that are already established in the United States to effectively address the situation and care for people when they need it at the absolute most, and seeing the absolute inability of those institutions to deal with crises. You would see it in a more indirect, slow way
Mm.
in other ways. You'd see their inability to care for the poor, you'd see their inability to provide health care to everybody, but you didn't see it as widespread all at once as you did with the
Yeah,
pandemic. And seeing that firsthand was like, okay, yeah, this is not just me seeing this in my community, this is a nationwide thing, right?
it's very immediate. Like the pandemic, it's happening to everyone at the same time, and everyone kind of fell over on their face, so to speak. Except of course rich people, because they have money to throw at the problem, and
Right.
who cares? Or if you're Ted Cruz, you just go to Cancun.
And then lie about it. The reason that you went is because your kids wanted to go, right?
Yeah, that's a real stand-up thing to do as a father, to throw your children under the bus when you leave your state to suffer from a almost never before seen snowstorm that knocks out power from millions of people. Really
Exactly.
stand up thing to do as the representative of your state.
Of course, personal responsibility is cringe.
But you had a
Scott
bunch of
says,
topics that I am prepared to discuss.
yeah, and Kava, you said, I think Fondue can agree that the USA is being locked down and made fun of for lacking basic services like affordable healthcare.
Yep.
Exactly, Kava, and that's
Yep.
exactly what we're gonna be talking about.
People in Europe laugh at the United States, and I don't know if people in the US understand how like Europeans are like they don't have health care. Like what the fuck is wrong with them?
Like
Like what do
how?
you mean? What do you mean they don't have health care? Like it's a normal thing to have. Like how do
Exactly.
you don't have that? Like and then it's like
Right.
you mean to tell me that the hat of America, motherfucking Canada, has health care? You mean to tell me the French figured out public health care and the US didn't?
Right. I know. It's absurd. It's absurd. Yeah, Kay, why don't we enable it, Kay? If you could for me, that'd be awesome. Ali, thank you for the host. Um, I've like a ask question redeem on my channel to
Mm.
are those alerts really loud for you guys, by the way? Sorry. I just realized I turned all of my volume up, so that might be insanely loud for you guys. I'm gonna turn Discord specifically up. I proved that probably wasn't the smartest thing for me to do.
It was the fastest though.
Exactly. I'm just my brain's going a million miles per hour.
You know
Yo,
how it
what's
is.
up, Rum? Thanks for stopping in. Thanks for stopping in. Okay, lords are a bit loud. Perfect. Okay, this should be good. If fondue is quiet again, though, let me know. Okay, so yeah, the first thing that I had kind of talked about because I think
Hmm.
this is probably the most hot button issue right this second in the United States.
Hmm.
Minimum wage.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to play the role. I want to play devil's advocate. God, I'm not gonna say. I want to. I'm gonna putting on my intellectual hat here. But I kind of want to play the role of an American who's probably not very politically involved, doesn't really
Hmm.
know, has to just watch the news, just the average person,
Yeah, yeah.
and kind of just ask you questions from that perspective because I
Hmm.
think it's a good way to articulate a lot of concerns that the normal person
Hmm.
may have with leftism and making that shift.
Hmm.
So minimum wage. Really hot button topic in the United States.
Hmm.
Some people are talking $15 an hour, all the way up to $25 an hour, with
Hmm.
$15 seeming to be the most popular suggestion right now.
Hmm.
The federal minimum wage right now, I believe, is
25.
$7.25. I
Yes.
believe, yes. And it's different in state by state. In Michigan, I think it's like just over $9. It's like
Yeah,
nine.
it varies from state to state, but the federal is 725. Yes.
Exactly. And in most, I think the highest. Let's actually look it up. Highest.
I think the
Like the
highest is
high
15 maybe in some states.
the highest minimum wage in the US is, it looks like, yeah, 15 in DC.
Yeah,
Just from a quick Google
which is
search,
not a
obviously
state.
not scientific, which is not a state, which is just exactly not at least not yet. Um, so we're talking about this.
Hmm.
So why has the minimum wage not gone up? Well, 7.25
Mm.
seems extremely low, even from the perspective of someone who's probably a little bit more conservative. Why is it so low?
Well, it hasn't gone up because there's hasn't been a big push for it. Like workers can't really push for it to go up because workers don't have a way to collectively bargain because the lack of unions in the United States, and the unions have been gutted in the United States. So that's one reason workers don't have a unified front to push for it, and also because it's in the company's interests to pay you as little money as possible. And it's the workers' interest to get paid as much as possible and work as little as possible. And the inverse is true for the owners of the companies. And this is like an inherent contradiction within capitalism, is that you as a worker want to work as little as possible and get paid as much as possible, and your boss wants to pay you as little as possible and work you as much as possible. And there's this conflict. So most of the politicians in the United States serve big corporations because lobbying is a humongous industry in the United States. So that's probably the main reasons why it hasn't risen. And like people should be shocked that it hasn't risen because minimum wage has to rise with inflation. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense because $7 now is not the same as $7 in 20 years. Like it doesn't make
Exactly.
sense that it stays stagnant, and it has stayed stagnant since 2009. It's been like 12 years since it has risen anywhere. Meanwhile, inflation has risen at a rate of almost 24%. So it doesn't make sense that it should be locked into this. And in theory, if minimum wage would have kept up with productivity, it should be $24 an hour now, roughly.
That would be the
So,
equivalent.
so even
of
15 is not like where it needs to be. And actually, if we adjust minimum wage to inflation, it is actually at its lowest point now since the 1950s.
that ratio of minimum wage versus inflation
Yeah,
is the lowest since the 50s, after right
or
after World War
or
II.
its value, like how much its value is compared to like in the 1950s, you made X amount of money, but then you have to adjust it for inflation, so how much it is in current money. So if we look at those numbers, this is the lowest it's been in like 70 years, which
Just
doesn't make sense.
which is
Unless
wild.
it would only make sense if you had extremely strong general agreements, which is what Finland, for example, has. Finland doesn't have a minimum wage because most industries in Finland have very strong general agreements. So these are agreements that everyone in the industry has to follow, which have been fought for by unions. And hence we don't need minimum wage. We haven't needed minimum wage. Now there's discussion because there's a lot of new industries that have come up in Finland, like tech, for example, that doesn't have general agreements. So their things are a little bit more like, eh. And then some industries are talking about getting rid of the general agreement. I don't think it's a good idea. It should just be amended to suit the needs, but that's a different discussion.
Right. And we got a question from my chat. You
Sure.
know, I don't know if this is a dumb question or not, but what is like the average minimum wage if it exists in other countries in comparison to the US? So like if you look at like Finland or Sweden, for example.
I don't have and it's a bit hard to compare it directly because you have to take into account cost of living. I don't want to say anything directly to it right now because I would need to look
Right.
up some like proper data, because I could say like, well, the average income in Finland is X, but it doesn't really mean much because like you might say, oh, it's bigger in the US, but what is the cost of living in between these two countries? Like in
Right.
the US, you'll spend a shit ton of money on, you know, basic necessities or healthcare. And in Finland, you won't spend that money. So cost of living can be relatively smaller. So just looking at the average income is not enough. It distorts because like that's actually a funny case in the game industry where if you work in the US, like just money wise, you'll make more money in the US, but your cost of living is also way higher. So usually people in Europe actually make more money in the game industry because they don't have to spend so much money on other things that cost so much in the United States that in Europe are just like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, and someone just said in my chat, you know, this kind of raised my question from, you know, again, kind of from what I think the average person kind of thinks in America.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one of the problems that we see with minimum wage being raised is, well, won't the price of everything go up? Won't companies just respond to that and raise their prices? So why
So
will that happen? Why will that not happen?
it could happen, yes. But if we look at changes in the restaurant food pricing, for example, during the period of 1978 to 2015, research found that prices rose by just 0.36% for every 10% increase in the minimum wage.
Interesting. And that was,
So
when was that?
this was between 1978 and 2015 in the restaurant industry.
Oh, wow. So, okay. So that's recent data as well.
Very recent data from a long period. I'm going to share this, by the way, the document I'm going through. I'm going to share it with you, Crub, later. I have all of my points here, and I have them sourced as well, so you can check the sources for all the data
Perfect.
that I mentioned here.
Yeah, and that's awesome. I was telling my chat that you had taken the time to put all that together, so I'll probably be sharing those sources with them as well, just so they can see everything, because I think that's super valuable.
Yeah. So if we were to double, like let's say it was from $7.25 to like $15, which is roughly double. Like I'm gonna do a little cutting corners with the math. So it'll be 100% more, which would mean that it would it would rise only like 3.6% would be the rising of prices. And the thing is, prices rise regardless.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if the minimum wage is raised or not. Prices will rise nonetheless. And inflation happens. Inflation happens, so, you know, $2 now is less in 20 years because of inflation. So it doesn't really matter. And also the bulk of like recent economic research on minimum wage establishes that prior increases have little to no negative consequence and have instead had meaningfully raised the pay of low wage workforce, which is a really, really good thing, because when they have more money, they can spend more money on the economy, and that's good for the economy when people spend money. And, you know, working class people typically spend their money. They don't hoard it. They don't keep it because they can't. They have to spend on necessities.
Which has always confused me about that argument. It's like, why would I raise my prices? You know, because if minimum wage goes up, demand goes up, right? Because you have people with more means just to buy things. Why would I raise my prices if demand is going up? I mean, like, obviously, you know, to an extent, right? Demand's going up, obviously, to keep my supply up. I have to raise prices a little bit. So but like you said, I think people mix it up. I think it's backwards. I think that minimum wage needs to keep up with inflation, not inflation needs to keep up with minimum wage. And I think that's kind of what we're taught in the United States, is that, well, inflation is always, if you raise minimum wage, it's going to go up again. Where I think based on what you said and based on what I've seen, it seems the opposite is true. That minimum wage needs to keep up with inflation.
Yeah, and like increases in price following minimum wage generally have occurred, like in the month the minimum wage isn't implemented, but not like before or after. And a study found that small minimum wage hikes, like in order of 5 to 15%, didn't lead to higher prices, and they actually lead to lower prices long term.
Yeah, we had a question. This is perhaps a tangent, but yeah, no, it's fine. I get it. But could relate to discussion of minimum wage. What are Fondue's thoughts on the implementation of UBI?
UBI, I think, generally is a great idea. I would love to see it implemented generally everywhere. I know that it costs money, but a lot of the things that we do in our government cost money. Healthcare costs money. Maintaining roads cost money. You know, there's a lot of things that cost money that the government does, and, you know, then it costs money. But I think universal basic income could be a very, very good thing for a lot of people, because it would take a lot of monetary pressure off people. And it has been trialed in numerous places, one of them Finland. And most of these trials have found that it does not impact people's willingness to work, that it makes people less stressed and more happy, but they still work the same. So
right.
With current data, I think it's a good idea. Of course, you know, the practicalities of how it's implemented and how do we fund it, etc. Of course, those are important questions that need to be figured out, but I think it's a great thing.
What do you think about UBI? This is my question. What do you think about UBI versus like things that we have in America, you know, now, like welfare, you know, other social programs, social safety nets? Do you think UBI might be a superior program to replace those entirely because of the lack of overhead that it has, because it's just bulk payment as opposed to all the requirements that you know, like welfare has?
It depends, like how big it is. Like if it's a if it's a considerable amount of money that you can like properly live off, then it can probably supplement or even majorly replace something like unemployment benefit. Because like, why would you need unemployment benefit when you have UBI? But it of course depends on the particulars. So it can supplement or even replace stuff. It's hard to say. It depends on the details, I would say.
Right. Which makes sense. So let's see so here's the other question related to minimum wage. You know, obviously, you know, will prices rise because of minimum wage? We've kind of determined probably not. Data suggests,
or if they do, the rises in price will be fairly small.
Exactly.
And you already have countries. You already have countries where McDonald's pays like $15 an hour. Denmark has a really high minimum wage, and McDonald's pays their employees that, and they have 5 weeks of vacation paid every year. And the price of their product is not crazy. It's their normal prices.
Yeah. So it is bizarre that it doesn't happen here.
So, actually, a good thing Lord Luke M said in my chat. A little example here regarding inflation. A Ford Model T was $900 in 1910. Adjusted for inflation, that would be $24,695 today. So that's how wild. Inflation works.
Right. And it just makes sense. Strong, thank you so much for the sub. I appreciate you. So the other concern that we hear a lot is, with minimum wage being risen, won't these companies just automate these jobs away? Won't they just get rid of these jobs, these quote unquote low skill jobs that can be so easily replaced by a machine? Won't they just be replaced?
Well, before I get into the data of stuff, they will do it anyway. Whether they have to pay less or more, it doesn't matter. If a company can automate a service, it will do that. Like, that's why jobs have been, since like NAFTA got put into place, that's why so many jobs in the US have been shipped abroad. That's why so many industries have collapsed within the United States. Industries that used to be very, very strong in the United States, cities like Detroit that are like
Yeah,
bankrupt
just where I
because,
live. I've
yeah,
seen, yeah, see that firsthand.
because those jobs were shipped abroad. And those
Yes,
companies didn't do them because, oh, the taxes here are so much and we have to pay so much. No, they did it because if the companies can save money by shipping it abroad, they will do it. If they can automate a job, they will do it,
we'll do
regardless
it.
of how much they have
Yep.
to pay people. If they can automate and save money, they will. That is their prerogative. The prerogative of business owners, big business owners, I'm talking like big business owners and medium sized business, is to maximize profit and minimize costs, and they will do that stuff. But then, getting into the study stuff, high quality studies have looked at the impact in low wage, high impact areas, and have yet to detect sharper job losses, even when the minimum wage is close to 80% of the local area median income. So a $15 minimum wage by 2024 would probably produce a wage at around 80% of the median wage in a state like West Virginia, for example. And they haven't found that there's like a significant change. And you have to also consider that at the same time, the risk of keeping minimum wage too low is increased poverty, inequality, racial injustice. Like these are things that will happen if the minimum wage is too low. People won't have enough money, they'll become poor, they will turn to criminal activities because people who are poor tend to do more crimes because they are desperate.
Poverty, exactly. Poverty breeds desperation. Exactly.
Yes, and crime is primarily driven by socioeconomic conditions. So if
Right.
someone is doing crime, you have to look at like, okay, what are their like economic situation? What is their social situation? What is their health, et cetera, et cetera? These are usually the things that drive crime, and poor areas tend to have more crime, unsurprisingly.
Right. Right. And so also related to minimum wage,
Mhm,
so minimum wage protects poor people, especially from the exploitation of larger corporations, medium business.
mhm,
Minimum. Now, here's another question. Coming from the U.S. If you're a small business, right?
mhm.
We already live in a quasi oligarchical state with the way that businesses take it, large
Not
corporations have
quasi,
taken over
fully oligarchical.
yeah, yeah, in the United States. If minimum wage is raised to say $15 an hour and I'm a small
Mhm,
business, how does that impact me? I don't have as much money to pay what these larger corporations are paying. How do I
mhm.
keep up?
That's a generally a more difficult situation. I would say it is a bigger problem with like capitalism because capitalism has this thing called a tendency towards monopoly. So in capitalism, we're always told that, competition breeds innovation, which is true to a certain point. Up until a certain point, a company's interest is to be innovative because then they can compete and they can get more, more customers and grow. But after a certain point, being innovative is not the best way to be competitive. The best way to be competitive is to have a monopoly. So how you can do that is you buy companies that are trying to compete with you to become part of you, to gain more of the market, or you can undercut the small businesses that cannot do this type of stuff. They cannot sell at a loss, where, Amazon can be like, okay, we're going to sell like for 5 years at a loss, and then we'll push out all of our competition, and then we'll raise the price again, which is
Right,
what they do. They've done
right,
this, and they've done this in several areas where they push small businesses out of existence. And that is like the bigger issue, whereas like the monopolies and the tendency towards monopoly will destroy small businesses more
right.
than raising the minimum wage.
Right, right, right. Which makes so you said that a big reason that the minimum wage hasn't been raised is because of the
Mm-hmm.
lack of unionization in the United States, the
Mm-hmm.
ability of unions uh to produce collective bargaining agreements to hold
Yes.
their employers accountable. What why is unionization become such a rarity in the United States, especially from a place that had a lot of strong unions back in the 20s, the 30s, the
Mm-hmm.
40s when there was the big unionization surge, at least from what I've read in the
Hmm.
past. That was a huge part of the American culture. What's
Yep.
caused that huge decline?
I'm not entirely sure on the history of unions in the United States, so I can't answer to like
Sure.
what has caused the specific change. From what I recall, there was like a federal level effort to curb on unions. I don't remember which year it is right now, so I'm not the best on the history of unions in the United States. That's not my area of expertise. But in general, like
Fair.
I can just say like unions are an important part of the working people because without unions, workers don't have a collective way to bargain.
Right.
So it's united we bargain, divided we beg.
So I should clarify too for anybody who might be unfamiliar with with what the heck is a union? What
Mm.
do they do? What's a union?
So a union is the workers, so it's not an outside force. Because that's often what anti-union messaging is trying to say, like an outside force is coming to your workplace. No, the union is the workers coming together to have a more united bargaining front for their rights and to make sure that their rights are respected. Because together, the workers can say, you need to do this for us or we will not work. Because the workers are way more powerful than the people who own the business. There's less of them, there's way more workers. And this is really important. Without workers, there is no product. So this is a good example from the Gravel Institute. I highly recommend following them on YouTube. If you work at a burger shop, like McDonald's or whatever, and you don't buy the materials or the equipment, etc. That's, the business owner does that. So say that they buy the material for you to make the burger. That's $1,000. And then you make the burger. The burger happens. Now it's a burger. Those burgers are sold. And that brings in $3,000. Well, that's great, Sold well, which means you added $2,000 of value to that. Because without you, those burgers wouldn't have been sold because they're just raw materials and equipment.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter how much money is next to it. It doesn't turn into anything useful. Money doesn't turn anything into anything. It's just money. So, but you're not given 2,000. The business owner wants to make a profit because they have to make a profit in order to survive. So, they give you a part. Let's say 1,000. So they steal $1,000 from you. This is why profit is theft, because profit is stolen from the workers. Now, you could argue that, you have to have profit in order to do R&D, grow the business. Okay, fair enough. I can understand that. But, the worker doesn't get to decide any of that. The worker has no say in who's making those decisions. There's no vote on like who runs the company or what the company does. You're just told like, hey, this is what the company's doing with the profit. And, then these people get it who are the shareholders and you get your pittance. And it's like, that's stolen from you. So, stuff like that is, without unions, you're just divided. If you as a single worker are like, well, I'm not going to come to work. And they're saying, okay, we're going to fire you and get someone else.
Exactly.
You don't have any power to bargain.
Right.
Because they're going to say, well, fuck you, you're fired. Get the fuck out. But if all the workers say, this McDonald's is going to close down, and these 15 cities, which is happening actually in 1 week, are going to have the McDonald's is closed down unless you meet our demands. Suddenly, there becomes a lot more pressure for the owners to be like, maybe we should listen to them because we're losing a lot of money because we're not open.
Right.
And
so
this
Case
is why.
said,
Yep. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, this is why unions are so important. However, I will point out, unions are not perfect.
Which is exactly what I was about to address. Kay in my chat said, speaking on experience with unions, and at least in the film industry, they end up getting a bad rap with productions because they seem to cater to large productions only, while making it impossible for small, more independent productions to even consider filming. I'm not sure where the root of the issue lies, but they're nearly impossible to work with.
And yeah, unions are not
Varies on
perfect.
industry, I'm sure.
Unions can become big institutions, and I definitely want to have unions be such that they are accountable to the members and not, the people who run the unions. But it's like, I would rather have a hierarchy that's main interest is the workers rather than a hierarchy that main interest is the shareholders. So it is not perfect, and we should definitely improve the current union system, absolutely. But just because it's not perfect doesn't mean we should just throw it out.
Right. Of course. We should work to improve on it.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So someone asked a question in my chat. Dune asked, why would an entrepreneur want to run a business in the first place and put that work in if there isn't a profit motive? What would be the motivator?
I mean, yeah, that's fine. A profit motive is a motivator for sure. But, why do you play video games? Why do you read books? Why do you watch TV shows? Have you done something nice to someone? Why did you do that for them? You didn't do it because someone was paying you to do that. You did that because you wanted to do that, because the escapism of playing a video game or watching a movie, because helping someone or doing something for someone makes you feel good and you're happy that they're happy. They can do something for them. So there's a lot of other motivators that we have in life than just profit. Profit is one of them for sure. Like Wikipedia is not profit run. It is
right.
It is completely fan run. Linux was made by people and it's open source. Like,
and those companies, I think when you say that, it sounds like, oh, they're not for profit. They don't make any money from that. The people that run things like that, they still are paid. They just don't have excess outside of their salaries, which goes into, profiting whatever the organization, the shareholders, whatever.
And, profit can be one, but like we can talk about this in a bit, but then I want to have more democratic workplaces.
Right.
We'll get to this in a little bit. Yeah. Because they're not. But let's talk about that in just a bit, because there's still some stuff about unions. Like unions, in the US, I know that there's some trouble with unions, and one union that you should definitely be wary of and know that it is full of shit is the police union. The police union is absolute dog shit because the police are not part of our class traders, so to speak. They do not protect you. Police are there to protect the interest of the owners and their property. That's what they protect. And because of this, the police union is one of the strongest unions in the United States, because the people who have the money have an interest for the police to be their friends and to serve them. And therefore, that union is really strong, but it's not good.
It's bolstered by institutions, right? Which makes sense. Good question in my chat. How would unions work with like franchise enterprises, like a McDonald's, for example? Because since McDonald's is franchised.
I mean, then you would have, let's say, the fast food restaurant union, and then all fast foods, let's say they would bargain for a general agreement. Let's say, like, we have to come up with like a hypothetical here, not to be too Ben Shapiro, but then, for example, hypothetically speaking,
Shabibo moment.
Shabibo. But then, you would have like the general agreement for the restaurant industry that all restaurants have to abide. And then, if the restaurant industry is like, we're going to strike now, then, restaurant workers strike. And that's how it would work.
Right.
I mean, that's how it would be. Sorry, Lucas saying Amazon workers go on strike every Christmas here in Germany, but Amazon doesn't really care because they plan for it and just go outside, get outside contracts to do all the work rather than raising the wages. That sucks. Yeah. Then they've lost their power essentially in that situation.
And I assume that's not possible for, most corporations to do that, but Amazon is a unique monster, that's for sure.
Indeed. But I mean, and then like people are, well, why are unions important? Do you like weekends? Do you like 40-hour work weeks? Do you like not having children work? Paid vacation, sick days? These are because of unions. Like, these things didn't fall out of the sky and like the people who run the business were like, you know what? I'm going to give you now the weekends. Like, no, people fought for these, sometimes bloodily fought for these changes. Like, they were fought for hard by unionists, leftists, anarchists. Like, these things didn't just come out of nowhere. It's really important to know that these are because of unions. Again, unions are not perfect. We can improve on them, but they have done a lot of good.
Yeah, exactly. The workplace would look much more much more tyrannical without you. Like you said, I like that idea of unions democratize the workplace, right? They give the workers who create so much value for corporations more power to bargain and make decisions on where the corporation goes from there, which is great.
There's a really good comment in my chat. Rum Inspector is saying the rise of gig economy should be addressed, like Wolt, Uber. Wolt is like a food service app here, etc. Making essentially workers into entrepreneur light and freelancers.
Yeah.
Yes, 100%. I mean, the UK just made a change, like a law change that where Uber drivers will now be considered employees. They basically forced them, and I think they
did that in the US too.
There's like a state. Was it California?
Maybe it was a single state. Let me.
I think it was a single state that was like they're basically forcing it, and that should be how it is. Like this is. It's basically companies being, how can we pay them less? So they're like, it's a gig economy. You have the freedom to decide your own hours, but we're not going to pay you any benefits because you're not an employee. You're a contractor.
Right. Yep. Exactly. Well, that's how Twitch works, right? Twitch is the same way. Contractors of Twitch. I don't work for Amazon. You don't work for Amazon.
No.
We are gig workers. We don't have.
Unless you have like a really good contract with Amazon and you're like top percent.
Of course. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
I ain't there.
Let's see here. The unions. Also, the unions people tend to think about as being this big monster that rules everything are the industries that have the biggest abuses. Exactly. Construction, teaching, nursing.
The unions ruling everything is a ridiculous idea because 10.1% of the United States is unionized. How the fuck are they going to rule everything if no one's part of them?
Exactly.
What power do they have? They have no power. So there are certain industries that have strong unions. SAG-AFTRA is a very strong union, which is the Screen Actors. It's the movie industry's.
That's what Kay was talking about.
That's like one of the stronger unions. But other than like outside of that, there's not a lot of unions that have power. Like they've been gutted. They are which like compare this to Finland. 60.3% of the working population in Finland is unionized, and it's even higher in Norway and Denmark, closer to 70%.
It's about 10% in the United States. Yeah. So I guess that gets us into some of these unions that have probably fallen over the years, or that when unions have been prevented from being created in the first place. What does it mean to union bust? What are examples of union busting? How can we identify when, oh shit, that CEO is clearly trying to union bust? Like what are red flags for, and what is it?
Not allowing workers to organize is one. Like not allowing them to talk about unions at work, for example. That's classical union busting. There was, because Amazon is having their their employees were trying to unionize. The vote didn't go through, but there's a lot of weird shit around it happening. So one of them was that the workers were trying to organize at a traffic light stop at Amazon, where they would get together when there was a red light and then talk about it. So Amazon changed the lighting system so that they couldn't organize, and it made their delivery less efficient because they fucked with their system. So,
oh my god!
And then
hurt their bottom line.
One thing, but it hurts them less in the long term because they,
of course,
if they unionize, it's even worse for them. Yeah, firing workers if they try to unionize, which is illegal. You have to remember, a lot of union busting activities are actually illegal to do.
Illegal, yes, they
are actually federally illegal in the United States and many other countries. Firing workers if they try to unionize. The hard part there is proving that they fired you because you were trying to unionize. That's the hard part. Why taking a company like Amazon to court is really difficult unless they specifically in writing say we fired you because you tried to unionize, which they'll never do because they know that they would clap like crazy. So they'll say oh, you were not a good fit, or they'll find reasons why they fired you.
Sure.
Then if there is union voting, trying to tamper with that's very or intimidate people. So with the Amazon voting that was happening now in Alabama, they were trying to force people to go vote in person rather than by ballot. And of course, in the middle of a pandemic, that's not a great thing to do. They also installed a mailbox, or a mailbox was installed outside of the factory, but no one knew who had access to the mailboxes there, who had the keys, because, and then Amazon was encouraging people to put their ballots in that mailbox, but no one knew who has the keys. So anyone could have gotten to the ballots and just like thrown them away that you don't know.
Right.
And of course, anti-union propaganda. Hey, we're all a family here. We don't need an outside force coming in and telling us what to do. We can just figure things out together. With like this type of rhetoric, saying that, you know, oh, you should just use your union dues to buy a new PlayStation, which is a thing that
I literally was Googling that as you said it, because I saw what could you do with $700? Tickets and food to a baseball game for a family aren't cheap. That $700 in union dues you'd be paying every year could sure go a long way. Delta Airlines.
yeah, yeah. So, and then of course there's if you just YouTube search like Amazon anti-union, and you'll find like Amazon training videos that are meant for like managers and higher ups that specifically like are meant to train people to look out for people who are doing union activities. Like, what are the signs that someone might be trying to unionize, and to recognize that and to report that, which is illegal. There was a question in my chat from Ace Tyro. Do unions functionize or organize differently in the countries that have higher percentage involvement? I would assume so. I can't speak for
Probably
a lot of European countries, but yes, if you, the more of the populace you have unionized, the working populace that is, the more power a union has, essentially, because the more people can strike. Because
right,
the bigger of a halt of work, the bigger the impact. Because if like 40% of a factory like we're going to walk out, but if 90% of a factory walk out,
good luck contracting all that work. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
This is a good question. What role would management play in a union? Would they be an intermediary, or would they fall to either side of the business or align with the employees?
What do you mean you mean like managers at a company?
Yeah, I suppose like if you had like upper management, you know, do they, is that kind of their decision? Can they, because
no, it's not really their decision. No, like if the workers unionize with the union that they want to unionize with. Like, it's not like the company can't decide like this is the union that we like, you can work with them. No, that's not how it works.
Right. I guess the question is more, do the upper level, let's say you know, you have an Amazon factory, and then you have a supervisor and a regional manager. That regional manager that is you know, an executive and works at the corporate offices. Well, that regional manager who's not doing you know, the labor, you know, wouldn't be probably wouldn't be associated with the labor union, right? Like they
probably not.
They wouldn't really I guess they probably could join it, but they would probably, because the question in my chat was, you know, would they be an intermediary, or would they choose one side or the other?
So when it comes to intermediaries, usually you have union representatives. So people who work at the company will be like union representatives as well. Gotcha. And so if there's any union related discussion that needs to happen, they will be the ones to contact the proper people at the company. And then of course, if things get more heated and you need more legal backing, then they bring in people from the union.
Right, which would probably, you know, the union. The union representative would probably be like an actual worker who works from that example, like in a factory.
Again, the union is formed of the workers. The union is not an outside entity, a company that comes in. The union is the workers. The people at the company, they're the union. So some of them, or one of them, depending on the size, will be like, this is the person who represents the workers, the representative of the union. They represent us here at the company. So if there's something that you want to discuss regarding the workers, talk to this person because they represent us.
Got it. Yep. Yeah. And they kind of clarified their question. They said kind of like a store manager. And I feel like on that low of a level, it might be kind
store manager, maybe, or like regional manager. It's like, where does the line be drawn? I don't know. It's not right. It's not that specific.
Probably depends on the industry and you know, and how much power that person actually holds in the company, right?
And then
I would assume
another union busting thing that I should mention is like trying to talk individuals out of unionization. You know, so you have like this happened at was it Tesla or SpaceX? I forget which one, but like they specifically tried to talk three people who were unionizing like out of unionizing. Like invited them into the office, and the HR manager was there with Elon Musk, and they were like, "Hey, we shouldn't do this union," and that's illegal.
I watched your video on that. Yep,
that is illegal. You cannot do that.
And then didn't they salary one of the employees that was leading the charge so that they could no longer unionize?
Or they tried to salary That was Tesla. Thanks, Luke. So they tried to salary the workers, and they're like, "We're gonna pay you more," and you'll be like the safety representative of the company, and is like, "Oh, that sounds good, doesn't it?" Well, here's the thing: if they become salaried, they can't unionize anymore. So that was just their way to try to like pay them a little bit more and give them like a little title, and then they can't unionize.
So does being salaried prevent unionization from being legal,
I
or
don't know how it works in the United States, and that's probably state by state. Depends. Like I don't know. That's a point that I don't know.
because that
In
provides some
Finland, it
clarity?
doesn't.
Yeah, yeah.
It doesn't in Finland, but I don't know how it is in the States. But in this particular case, like, yeah, I don't know why it is that way, but it is. But I wanna jump to fucking democratizing the workplace. Listen, I want to talk about
for sure.
that.
I have one more question from
Sure.
from a viewer really quick about you. Might kind of fall into the same discussion though. To democratizing the workplace. Rissy says the game industry is rampant for its abuse of workers, finding ways to get around paying employee benefits, normalize crunch overtime, treating developers as disposable resources. As someone actively in the industry, is Fondue aware of efforts to promote unionization within the game industry to improve practices for workers? For as visible as these issues seem to be in every major release, I'm surprised I don't see more movement.
There is movement in the industry, but it's really, really difficult because a lot of the industries in the United States, unions have been gutted. Anti-union propaganda has basically made a generation of people be like, "Ew, unions are terrible, evil things." So it's difficult. It takes a lot of work. There is the Game Workers Unite union. I think it's called Game Workers Unite, which is a global, Game Workers Unite, which is a global labor movement for the game industry. They have chapters all around the world. Biggest one is, I think, in the US. There's also one in Finland that got started like 4-ish years ago, like a union for the game industry, which is part of the engineers union in Finland. But it's a new industry. It's a very young industry. Like the game industry as an industry is like 30 years old, 40 years old. Like it's a super, super young industry. And because of that, like unionization just hasn't had time to happen. And because of that, and because it's a new and sexy and very profitable industry, abuse is very rampant. And because it's passion driven also. People are are very easy to abuse because people get into video games because they love video games and they want to make video games. So it's really easy to abuse that passion.
Which makes sense. Yep. Yeah, but and you were talking democratizing the workplace.
Democratizing the workplace will help with this, actually. So, one of the most important things that people always tout about Western civilization is that we're democratic, right? Like American people would say, like, one of the most important ideals of being American is being democratic. But the place where we spend a majority of a big part of our life, work, is not democratic. It's authoritarian by nature. Because you have a boss, and, maybe they have a boss and they have a boss, but they decide who your boss is. You don't have no say in who your boss is. They decide who your boss is. They decide what you should do. They say, you do this. Here's your tasks. This is what we're going to do. You have no say in that. You have no democratic process of affecting that. You have no say in what is done with the profit. You have no say in what the goals of the company is, what the company should be doing in the long term. And I'm not saying every decision should be voted on because people are like, oh, then the janitor will vote for everything. It's like, no, that's not what I mean. But you have no say as a worker. They might listen to you if you're like, I think we should do this. But there's no process. There's no democratic process of doing this. And I think democratizing our workplaces would be incredibly important because democratizing the workplace will make people happier. There's research to show this. Did I put it here? No, let me get the research doc. So there's this great streamer called Roserist. He's a Swedish political streamer. Oops. And he made this great Google Doc that outlines research that he done, research on something called cooperatives, which is a democratic business form. It differs a little bit on how the ownership works from country to country and company to company, but it is a very, very strong indicator that worker co-ops tend to survive the first few years as a business better, People are happier in worker co-ops. They get paid better at worker co-ops. The company usually resists price shock better than traditional companies. Like, it's not perfect. Like, it has some problems for it, for sure. But overall, like, it can be a very, very positive thing. Let me post to you in the Discord.
Interesting hearing that, because that's something that it makes sense, and it's a concept that makes sense to me, but it's something that I don't think I've ever heard about living in the United States.
Yeah.
I don't think I have ever heard about a company using something like this to make it more democratic, to give workers more power and like with their leadership, things like that.
Yep. So actually, I need to dig my because I made a few videos on worker co-ops. Let me dig the research that I did for that, because one of the most famous examples that people use for co-ops is Mondragon in Spain, which is a federation of cooperatives. It is a good example. It is not perfect. It has problems. Where did I put it? Is it no? I can't find it right now. I'm sorry.
Worker co-op. Can you give just like a top line explanation of what a worker co-op is? Because it makes sense. It's it's a form, or it's like a voting form or something where or like a group of workers coming together to be able to vote on more higher up executive decisions, right? From what I'm understanding.
So it is kind of changing the dynamic of how a company is structured. So it is a more democratic model of working. So instead of having a board of directors and shareholders who basically decide everything, this depends on the company as well, like how it's structured, because there are many ways to structure a worker co-op. But essentially, you could think of it as like every worker has one vote, and big decisions everyone votes on, and then for smaller decisions and like who's the manager, etc., you vote on that. You vote on who is the manager for this thing and for that thing, and then you work with that. And think of it like how our society runs now in terms of democracy. It's not perfect, granted, but it's a lot better than having kings and feudal lords.
Of course. Which is what the current workplace environment turns into. It turns into, like you said, an authoritarian state, where and that's where we spend most of our time. We don't spend most of our time outside the walls of work.
Yeah, like we spend a huge amount of time there. And this is also why people are alienated from their work, because like you go to work and you learn, it's like, I just fucking work here, who cares? It's because you have no stake in the company. You have no ownership of the company. And that's also an important part of worker co-ops, is that the workers own the company. It's not just that they get to say in what the company is doing. They own the company. The company isn't owned by it can be owned partially by external people. That also is like how you want to run the company. You might want to vote that, this percentage is owned by external money, of course. But it can also be like, this is 100% owned by the workers. They own them. So when the company does well, everyone benefits from it.
So you have exactly like you said.
Because now, like, if you work for Amazon, and everyone was like, we had a record year. Why the fuck would you care? You don't get to get shit from that.
It literally means nothing.
It doesn't mean anything to you. You work at a fucking factory and have to piss in bottles and shit in bags.
Exactly.
They might give you like, here's an extra month's salary, a pittance.
Yes.
A fucking pittance thrown your way, and it's like just to make you shut up and think like, wow, they're so nice. No, they're not. Like, Jeff Bezos has an insane amount of money in it that he's stealing from everyone at Amazon. Like, it is just ridiculous and ludicrous to think like oh, but they're so nice. Like, no, they're literally robbing you.
Exactly. Question in my chat from Risky: is it possible to democratize a private business without completely dismantling it and starting over from scratch? How would you take a company owned by private shareholders and turn it into something owned by employees and workers?
It's a good question, and that is like, it's probably cheaper and better than just having to start new companies, is transform current companies into worker cooperatives. How you would do that for a company would be very case by case. Like, I can't say like, here's the model how you do it, because for different levels and for different industries, it would have to work differently, and we would have to try different models. I mean, one of the things that we should do like right now is research more into worker cooperatives. We should fund more government research into worker cooperatives. What type of models that we could use? How could we transform from one to the other? And we should also fund and give like tax breaks for people to start worker cooperatives. We should also educate people on worker cooperatives. How do they work? How can people get involved? How can this happen? Like we can make these types of things that can help us toward that future. We can't snap our fingers and tomorrow everything is a worker cooperative. Obviously not. That's not going to work. It would be like a disaster. But
exactly. And look,
but it's a journey. You have to educate people. You have to do research into this stuff. Like there's no easy way out of it, so to speak.
It's a great point, because like I said, I would say I'm a pretty leftist person. I'm a pretty politically involved person. I try and stay, up to date on socioeconomic issues. I had not heard of a co-op until today. So it's,
I literally heard of it from watching Vosh, who is another leftist streamer. I watched his thing and he mentioned like, yeah, your workplace isn't democratic. And I was like, it isn't. It's right. I don't have any say at the workplace. I have no way to inform anything. And it's just like hit me. I was like, fuck, it's so true. Like I don't have any say. Or
risky. I love the.
And then like people are like, oh, but what if you become the CEO one day and then you can exploit people? What the fuck kind of system? Because people are like, well, you're just jealous and you should become a CEO. Okay, then everyone becomes a CEO. Where the fuck are the workers now? There's no workers anymore, you idiot. Like it's not a systemic solution. We need systemic solutions, not fucking bootstraps and personal responsibility. No, we need systemic solutions for this stuff. Not just like, well, you should just become a CEO. That's not a systemic solution.
Exactly.
I found 100%. My documents.
Do you know off the top of your head any examples of companies that have transformed into worker co-ops?
I don't. Yes, I do. It is a company called John Lewis Partnership in the United Kingdom. It was.
Rings a bell for me for some reason.
It's a really big convenience store in the UK. Any Brit bongers might know of it. John Lewis is a co-op. It's not a co-op per se, AC. It is more a democratic workplace model. So it used to be it was owned by just one person. And then his name was John Lewis, unsurprisingly. But then he died, and his son, John Spuden Lewis, converted the firm into a public company, and he published a 268-page constitution for the company.
What? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And now it has like 29 department stores. Like and it has like over 76,000 employees, at least in 2010, with like $7.4 billion pound turnover and 306.6 million pound net profit. Like it's a big company. But the structure there is more like a constitutional democracy kind of thing. Like you have this document that kind of states everything, and then you have like elections for chairmen of like different regions, and like it's very organized.
Interesting. That's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Then there's also a company called Semco in Brazil. This is like, it is owned by one person, but their structure is very interesting because they're like a manufacturing company. They make industry manufacturing stuff, and it's not company. Sorry.
Oh no, I'm looking at. I didn't bring up the Brazilian one. I'm sorry. I brought up a different company, which is an energy company in Michigan.
Yeah, there are a bunch of worker-owned companies, but you don't hear about them a lot because it's not sexy for capitalism to promote this stuff. But yeah, so Semco, the way that it's structured itself into like cells, and each cell is like cross-disciplinary. So you'll have like people who make the stuff, you'll have sales, marketing, finance, HR, production, everyone in that cell, and then they kind of set their own goals, and they have like people who speak to other cells within them, and it has like this whole structure inside of it. Like they have coordinators who coordinate between the cells. But the interesting thing about these companies is like how they share profits. Like in Semco, each division twice a year gives 23% of the after-tax profit of the division to 3 employees elected by the workers of the division.
Wow, so they'll choose like the exemplary employees,
and those 3 can invest the money until the division can meet and decide by majority vote what to do with the money.
That's so interesting.
That's
so
interesting. And usually this means dividing the money equally among the workers.
Right. Just wow.
Because their point is not only profit, their interest is also their salary, because they own the company and they're the workers. So having a good salary is in their interest.
Yes.
For Jeff Bezos, giving good salary to your factory workers is not in your interest. You don't care
whatsoever.
It's not in your interest. It's just an extra cost.
Exactly. Because they're at that point they're expendable, right?
And with Semco also, it's interesting because each employee can take a salary cut up to 25%, like if the company's not doing well, and if they have a profitable year, they'll be like paid back up to 125% of their regular salary. So they can choose like hey everyone, been a rough time, it's been a bad year, let's all take a cut, we decide that together, and if it bounces back, then we get to profit from that
next year. Exactly.
And everyone is in that. It's not like the CEO is like, well, we're gonna have to fire 5,000 people now, but my salary is gonna stay the same. This is one of the most frustrating things about Activision. Activision will fire people, they'll fire like 900 people, and then they'll report a record year in profits. And it is disgusting that they do this kind of thing.
Yes. Yeah, because what is there's no prerogative for them to there's no prerogative for them to keep those employees, because their profit margin is all that matters, right? Because those and yeah, that definitely it's really interesting to me. This is a really interesting concept, and I'm glad you introduced it to myself in my chat.
It's like a radical change to how our life is structured. It's exactly. Like completely radically changing it.
There's this I know that there is this ideology pushed in the United States that you want to move away from a profitability incentive, and you want to towards democratizing the workplace like this. Well, that just means people won't want to work. People like you're trying to get out of working harder, and it's like, no, this is going to motivate people to work harder, because when they work hard, they benefit from it. Exactly.
They own that thing. It's theirs. It's not someone's who they never see. They have way more of an incentive that way because they're part of it. It's their skin in the game.
Exactly.
And then there's a Norwegian company called Contega. It's fairly small though. It's like 85 employees in 2011. So it's not that big. But what happened with that is that they used to be part of an IT company, and it was founded when there was a buyout of that IT company. So they bought part of it to themselves, and they formed their own company through that. That is actually another way.
You cutie.
Another way that we can incentivize co-ops is that we give workers the right of first refusal. So if a company is getting bought out or stuff, the workers can be like, no, wait, we're actually going to buy it. Now we're going to buy it, and we own this company. We have the right of first refusal. And that's a way that you can incentivize that as well. But anyway, getting to this, it's a very small company, so this probably wouldn't work on a larger scale. But the way that it works is that there's an internal share ownership plan. And after a 6-month trial period, all employees have the right to buy shares every month. Like, you start working there after 6 months, now you can own stuff. And they've actually set up an agreement with the bank so that they can offer loans to finance buying the shares for employees that don't have a lot of money.
Oh, wow. That's really interesting. So so does the company take that loan, or do the employees take the personal responsibility for that loan?
I think it's like the employee takes the loan themselves, but they have an agreement with the bank so that they can do that easily.
Got it. Wait, so so it makes sense. Yeah, protects them. Got it. That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yep. And profit sharing wise is like profits are given to all employees through dividends because everyone owns shares.
Because everyone owns shares in the
most
company.
people own shares.
Exactly.
So, and like in 2010, they paid out a dividend of 3 Norwegian kroner per share for a maximum of 150,000 kroner, which is almost 20,000 euros per employee through dividends.
Well, per employee. Wow. That's wild. And it just makes sense.
Yeah,
it just makes sense.
That huge amount of money, the profit, doesn't go to a small group of people anymore. It goes to everyone. And
exactly.
Like, hold on, where's the Mondragon stuff? I just found it. Yeah, so with Mondragon, there's a really interesting system. So it's a federation of cooperatives. It's very big now. Like, it's over 85,000 members, and it's been around since the 50s. So it's very, and they have like schools and a university, banks, supermarkets. Like, they have their own region where you can basically like live. And they have a decision-making body, like the General Assembly, and it gets together once a year. And that's where they like kind of decide all the big things, who is the general manager of the company is voted on, all that kind of stuff. And, you know, of course, your criticism might be like, well, how do people know what to vote for? And how do people know what's the right decision? They're educated on that. They have mandatory preparation meetings before the General Assembly so that they can learn about, you know, the business side of things, on how the company's been doing, where we should invest, where we don't invest. Like, the solution to a lot of the, well, people won't know, is educate them.
Exactly. And I think people have this misinterpretation that the average factory employee, for example, is too ignorant to understand how business works. I learned more working at a retail store for a couple of years than I did going to school for marketing for 4 years, right?
Yeah.
It's like it is not that complicated. Everybody learns what they need to do on their job once they start working at their job. It's not a matter of having some kind of college education or having some kind of background, some intense academic background in order to understand the basics of how you should be, how the business should be run.
Like, and for some stuff, like, you will need like more educating than other stuff. Yeah, obviously.
Of course, absolutely.
For sure. But like making decisions on the company and stuff, these can be educated.
Yeah, absolutely.
People can be educated.
So of course, that, you know.
So here's where Mondragon gets really interesting. So the way that they split up their profit is 10% of every enterprise's gross profit is put into a common fund for sustaining the system that coordinates the federation, because it requires a lot of coordination. It's big. 45% of every enterprise's gross profit is left for every enterprise to build their cooperatives. So, you know, you put it back into the system to build the cooperatives, as you would do in a normal company as well. The last 45%, however, this is where it gets interesting. So this is distributed to all members, but it's put into a fund on the basis of each member's pension. So it becomes an extra pension for you. This is on top of the national pension of Spain. So you have that pension, and then you have your Mondragon pension separately. And at the end of each year, you get 7% as a bonus of the amount that you've accumulated of the pension to that point.
So you're not only getting long-term savings, you are also getting a direct payment that year, short-term and long-term monetary benefit from holding a stake in that company.
Yep.
Which just makes sense.
So these are some of the examples that I looked into like almost a year ago. And then, yeah, the document from Rose Wrist is a lot more like, it talks about like the benefits and how they work and what are the challenges and that kind of stuff. It's a really good document.
I'll send that document in chat, guys. If you guys want to take a look at that, I've got the link to it here.
It's a thick one though. It's like 16 pages.
Yeah, it's like it's a read. So like, you know, it's something you're gonna sit down and really read later if you're interested.
But yeah, that's my spiel on like democratizing the workplace. Like, there will be challenges, and it's a radically different way of organizing our work life. But I think it can make people happier, more engaged in their work. It can make people more engaged with their community that they work with because they're all in it together. And it can make everyone more money, except of course the people who are super rich, but fuck them.
But it's not like, it's taking away their livelihood, right? Like it's not.
They're not going to become poor. They will become part of that system They will also
Yes.
benefit from that system. They will also become workers.
Company will be more profitable because of that system. Like their company will do better. Entrepreneurs will have a more successful company because their employees will actually hold stake.
I mean,
It
there are certain areas in like research and development is one of those areas where co-ops are need to be figured out. Like, how do we do that? Because
sure, might be more
that's
of a
one of the
challenge.
weaknesses of co-ops is like research and development, where you have to put a lot of money into something without any guarantee that anything's going to come out of it. That's one of the
Exactly.
like, how do we solve this? And it's we need to
Of
research
course,
it.
there are gonna be
We need
hurdles.
to try things.
Yes.
That's what we need to fund now from like a government standpoint. What can we do now is fund research into cooperatives and cooperative models, give tax incentives and tax breaks for cooperatives,
Dude,
make
yep.
it easier for cooperatives to get loans, because right now it's difficult for cooperatives to get loans because of the structure that they are built with,
Right.
and educate people on cooperatives
Exactly.
and democratic
Yeah,
workplaces.
I think it's really important to educate
Mhm.
people on that. Question from my chat: do you think we'll see anything along the lines of Corbyn's labor policy proposal to give workers funding to buy a company if an owner tries to sell it?
That would be dope. Yeah, I think that would be great. I think that would be really good. Yeah, and I think they, I forget, because Lonerbox made a great video recently where he responded to Vosh's like workplace democracy stuff, and he talked about some like stuff like that had been in place in the past. I think Italy had a thing similar to that, where if a company was being sold, there was a fund that I don't remember the details, but recommend that video. It's a good video on this topic as well.
Really interesting as well. It just goes along again. I go along with the democracy in the workplace, giving workers the ability to control ownership. If ownership decides to jump ship,
hey,
right?
like I want democracy, and this is more democracy. This is democratic. Our workplaces are not democratic. They are authoritarian by nature, and that's just like, it's hard to like get through to people because people are like, no, what do you mean? Like, eh.
Yeah,
it's
like,
or it's like,
what do you mean? Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
Or it's like, well, the people at the top deserve it, and it's like, well, why do they deserve it?
Right,
Why?
exactly.
Because people will try to like justify the high pay of CEOs or the profits that they make, but the challenge that I usually want to make is like, well, what is it based on? Why do they get paid so much? What's the metric? Because it's not time, because then anyone could spend like 100 hours a week and earn their salary. Like, it's not time. If it's like the value that they bring to the company, okay, how do we measure that objectively? Because it has to be objectively measurable. Otherwise, it's just arbitrary bullshit, which it is. That's the point of my prodding questions, is to point out how arbitrary it is. Because there is no metric that they can give me that is objectively measurable, because it's just an arbitrary, like, because the average pay difference between a CEO and an average worker in the United States is somewhere between 200 and 400 times, depending on your source, which is ludicrous. Because in Mondragon, they have agreed that the highest earner in a cooperative and the lowest earner can have a magnitude of difference up to maximum 9 times.
And that's still insane. If the lowest level worker is making $20,000 an hour, $20,000 a year, that's still $180,000 for the top paid employee. That is stupid money. That is stupid money. That is a lot of money. Like that is well above the livable wage.
And I'm okay with some difference. Like, that's fine. I'm not saying everyone should get paid the same.
Of course,
I'm okay. But hundreds of times more, how do you justify that? Like,
and
how is that
the barrier that people run into? It's either we keep what it's just binary, right? We keep what we have now, or everyone gets paid $20,000 an hour as poor. There is no in between that people can understand, right? People think that the implementation of systems like this immediately is going to take away all of the profit, or all of the value of this higher level work.
You want everyone to be just like Venezuela, brother.
Yeah, you want everybody to have the same house, painted the same way, living in the same clothes.
Socialism's window iPhone, brother. So, sorry, Lucas saying, well, there needs to be some sort of incentive to CEOs and entrepreneurs, because if they are good, nice, or whatever, they have a lot of responsibility and normally took a high risk building their company. Sure, like, they took risk starting a company. The employee takes risk every single day. Their whole economy is tied to this one company. They could get fired their job could get shipped abroad. Their factory might get closed down any single day. They take this risk every day. So to say that the worker doesn't take risk is fallacious. They also take risk. You could be fired, like, oh, you're fired. In the United States, oh, your healthcare is gone. Your family's healthcare is gone. Like, this is the risk that workers take every single day in the United States. So I understand that, CEOs want to see some profit for that risk. But again, I'm not saying that there doesn't need to be profit. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that the control and the ownership should be democratic, because democracy is important and it's more just. And if you look at the document that Rose Rist put together, it also seems to make for better business.
Right, exactly. Someone made a good point. Risky made a good point in my chat. A bunch of workers will fight against their best interests because they see that big number and will fantasize about getting there next as well. It is a motivator for workers, especially, and when workers don't hold stake like that, and when workers don't see the ability to profit more and have more of a stake in the company, that is probably what you strive for. You strive to be a CEO. You strive to be a successful, an entrepreneur who owns a company, because it's either that or you're in the labor force, which has no actual stake in the company, right? Mm-hmm. That is how you gain stake in a company in our current system. Yep. You have to be at the top. You have to be at the top. So it's
not a systemic solution, because by design, most people can never be there. So most people will never have a stake. And they'll just be alienated from their work. They won't care about the work that they do. They'll be inefficient. They'll just like, I don't work here. What the fuck? I care.
Exactly.
But yes, I'm like, again, people who manage the company at a higher level, and like people who are doing like the simplest jobs, let's put it this way, there can be a difference. But it should not be magnitudes of hundreds. It should be like maybe 10 times.
Exactly, and I think that's reasonable. I think that's entirely reasonable.
Luke said only CEOs and robots in the future. Hey, if they could have that right now, they would do it like this.
Robots.
Oh, and that was also that was also I forgot to say that earlier, because like it was like, well, if they have to pay more, they'll just ship jobs outside. One of the points I forgot to bring up is some jobs cannot be shipped abroad. You cannot ship abroad to the restaurant industry. That doesn't work. It doesn't work. It's not possible. The whole point is fresh food. You can't make that. You can't make the burger in China and then ship it over and then have it.
McDonald's food, maybe. I think it might survive the journey.
I mean, you could do the microwave shit, but like restaurants doesn't work. Delivery, Amazon delivery cannot be shipped abroad, because you have to deliver it in the country. So there are certain industries. There are certain industries that cannot be shipped abroad. Some can, and they have, and they will, but some industries cannot. Yeah, McDonald's could make it work. Yeah, unfortunately, they would.
Yeah, they would. Yeah, with but yeah, even with things that you would think you probably could easily automate away, like for example, grocery store cashiers. You look at a store like Amazon's personless store or whatever. People still have to stock the shelves.
Yeah,
people
exactly.
Still have to. There are going to be people have to service the cash registers.
Exactly.
People have to service the.
There will be new jobs.
Everything. There will be issues. There have to be janitors. It's not going to be all self-cleaning. We are not at that level of automation yet, and maybe we will get there, but
not by a long shot.
I don't think we're going to be there for tens of years. So at the very least, so it's So I think automation is a concern, but not as much as I think people.
I think this kind of brings us to naturally to our one of the points that you want to bring is taxes, because a lot of people in America are like, tax is bad, and it's like, no, taxes are good. They help build stuff like roads. You like roads, don't you? Infrastructure, like this is one of the most ludicrous things about the United States. The United States has an absolute dog shit railway network. It's really bad.
Oh yeah, it basically doesn't even exist. Yeah.
I've taken the train from Chicago to San Francisco. It's like 2.5 days. It's a cool trip, don't get me wrong. But it's like, how are your trains this shit?
Yeah.
Like Japan and China have like crazy
bullet trains that freaking exactly.
I don't need roads in my 4x4 pickup truck, brother. True. I didn't think about that
Yeah,
one.
you see that a lot in Michigan specifically.
Mm.
Michigan's wild because the automotive industries are here, right? So this is just me conjecturing. I don't actually have stats for this, but my guess is that automotive industry has lobbied significantly against public transportation here because the amount of public transportation we have here is absolutely non-existent. We
The
don't
reason
have.
why the reason why LA doesn't have any public transportation is because the auto industry's lobbied against it.
Yep. Yep.
That's
Yep.
the reason.
I cannot get, there is no way for me to get to Detroit unless I go to a bus stop, which is, I don't know where the nearest bus stop
And
is.
that's not normal.
Honestly.
Like in Europe, we have really good public transportation. Like it's just like you don't have it. It's like, what the fuck do you mean you don't have public transportation? It's like, no, everyone drives a car. And it's like, why? That's dumb. It's
Right.
really inefficient. But like you were asking, like, are billionaires taxed enough? No, they're not. Like, just straight up, billionaires are not taxed enough. Just 100% not. Because like this is a really important thing to remember. People forget this often. 1 billion is not 10 million. 1 billion is 1,000 million.
1,000 millions, which is just
like
absurd.
It's an absurd amount of money that everyone here in this chat, you'll never have that money.
Yeah, and everyone
watching
say,
right now, you will never have that money. And you're like,
not their liquid
well,
assets.
I'm built different. No, you're not. Shut up. You're not built different. You're not built different.
Actually,
you're not going to have that money. You're not. Statistically speaking, no one here is going to have that money. And
people will say, "Oh, it's not liquid assets." It's not. It's not like they have $1 billion sitting in their backyard. It's like, right, but you know what they own? They own. Yeah, sure. Maybe some of that is accounted for in the company that they own. Whatever.
And of course, they don't have it as like straight up cash. No, of course not.
Exactly. But like their house, all of the cars they own, all of the properties they own worldwide. They probably own overseas properties. All of that is still unnecessary excess. That is still unnecessary excess. That is not required for them to live. That is not even required for them to live a happy life. There are statistically speaking, happiness does not raise once you meet a certain threshold. Yep. So that amount of excess is not improving their life in really any capacity, nor the lives of others, obviously.
And remember, we talked about the burgle example where you were being stolen the $1,000 that's being stolen from you. And in order for you to become a billionaire, you have to exploit and steal from thousands, if not tens of thousands of people for a very, very long time. That's why, Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates and all these people have those crazy amounts of money, because they're stealing it. They're stealing it from workers. They're stealing it from me and you. It's being stolen from people. And because of that, they need to get taxed up the ass. They need to get taxed like crazy because it's our money, so it should get taken back and put into stuff like public healthcare, infrastructure, roads, internet, which should be free. Elon Musk as well. Thanks, Luke. Yeah, like it's our money, so it should be spent on things that are profitable for us, not like, hi, my name is Jeff Bezos, and I can't think of another way to use my money than space travel,
right?
which is what Jeff Bezos on camera has said. He cannot think of another way to use his billions than space travel. I have a few ideas.
Solve world hunger, maybe, just a thought. I don't know.
There's the account there's a Twitter account called has Jeff Bezos ended world hunger?
World hunger? Yeah, yep. I follow that account. I'm familiar. But then, before we get in, go ahead.
Yeah, but what should that tax percentage be for the ultra wealthy? I don't know. I'm not an expert I'm not an economist. Someone else can figure out. Is it 90? Is it 95? Is it 80? I don't know. It should be a lot though. Exactly. And maybe we should have a wealth cap. Maybe there should be after this amount of money, again, I'm not going to say what that amount is because I don't know. But maybe we should have a wealth cap. After this cap, if you reach this cap, you get taxed 100%. We give you a little gold medal, say you won at having money. Congratulations. Yeah. You won.
Well done.
Now you'll get taxed 100% after this certain you get more money, and then always when it goes above that goes back to the people.
Exactly. Well, before we get into the next subject, do you mind if I take a cheeky little piss?
Of course, go for it.
Awesome, pal. I will be to my chat. I will be right back. BRB.
Hello, Crubs chat. No, it's me. I have control. Unless you can't hear me anymore because we put a BRB screen. But in which case, hello, chat. Have you been enjoying our conversation with Crub, everyone? This is high quality stuff, by the way, Fundu. Thank you. I'm glad that you're liking it. AC, thank you for the kind words. But yeah, Luke, thanks for mentioning Elon Musk. Forgot to mention him. Wonderful Elon Musk. Oh yeah, Turpini, you know about cars and city planning and stuff, yeah. Cul-de-sac. Why don't you come cul-de-sac? Hey! Would make a good longer form vid, in my opinion, but I like watching longer. Yeah, I'm going to put this on YouTube. Don't worry. I will put this on YouTube for sure. Absolutely. It will be very long form. Very nice. But it's been really fun because I did enjoy like looking a little bit into, because, you know, Crub sent me a bunch of questions like, why is rent so high? And I'm like, why is rent so high? And then start looking up like actual data points to not just me be like, well, it's high because things are bad. I'm Jordan Peterson. Things are bad because bad things happen. But if good things happen, then things would be good. Hello. And if you don't want to give that money to the state, you can just donate it or do something useful with it and not just... yeah, I mean, there's an easy way to not reach the wealth gap. Just don't earn that much money, bro. It's super simple. Just don't earn that much. You can stop being a billionaire anytime. You can just be like, okay, I'm just going to give it away. But then, of course, we have to be careful that, because currently philanthropy is like a major bullshit thing. So we have to also be careful of that. Hey, yeah, I guess I'm an actual expert. Bachelor of Arts in Vehicle Design. And I'm doing a Master's Studies in Sustainability. You are actually an expert on this, Dorpini. Yes. Fuck? Welcome back.
All right. Hello. Thank
Oh,
you for
welcome
the
back.
intermission. I appreciate it.
Intermission course.
Brother. I gotta find my scene.
That's what God wants me to have with my sister, brother.
All right, chat. That's the end of the collab. Nice hanging out.
This is a pro Coomer stream. Shut up.
True. This is a very pro Coomer stream.
I love how you're very... Actually, you're correct.
we're very pro Coomer here. I can't discourage Coomer behavior. So I was thinking about it while I was peeing. Just peeing thoughts. So I guess the argument for not taxing billionaires, you know, the more like good faith argument that isn't like, oh, they deserve it or whatever, is okay. You know, if we do that, they're just going to hide their wealth in offshore bank accounts. They're going to move to a different country and live there. They're going to evade it in every way possible. How do we prevent that?
You mean the things that they already do?
Exactly.
They already do all of these things. Like it's not going to change in that perspective. We need to plug those loopholes up. Like that's a big problem of moving money offshore. Like this is a huge problem and that's like actual theft from like the American people or whatever country. Right. If you want to be nationalistic,
international fraud.
If you want to be nationalistic about this stuff, they are stealing from the people, literally. Like Amazon in 2018 didn't pay any federal income tax. Zero. That is theft. Yep. Like they already abuse these loopholes. They already ship the jobs abroad that they can. Raising the tax won't change that.
Right.
Like if they can put it away already now, and if they can avoid the taxes now, they'll do it now as well. Like that's not going to change.
Right.
Those
loopholes
need to be plugged up, and a massive problem, of course, is lobbying. Like super PACs in the United States are a terribly corrupt thing that should be disallowed. The super PACs basically allow companies and private individuals to funnel as much money as they want into whatever political campaign or person that they want. There's like no limits.
Yeah, and Risky makes a good point to this. And it's, you know, how do we do this? It makes me mad because I see a path forward toward a lot of these solutions as being near impossible in the current socio-political climate. Too much power and corruption and bad actors interested in obstructing progress. So how do we overcome these humongous institutions that protect the interests of a place like this?
There's more of us than there's them. Organizing, educating each other,
organization,
coming together. You know, Bernie Sanders has done a huge thing for leftism in the United States. He has popularized ideas like universal health care, applying pressure to politicians, calling your representatives when you find out that they're spending more money on the Israeli military than they are in like healthcare in the United States.
Oh man,
You call
I
your
have acted.
you call your representative and you say this is disgusting, and if you
Yep.
vote for this, I will never vote for you again. Like
Yep.
it's organizing, it's militant organizing, and that's the
Yeah.
only way that we
It's a
can
lot
do
of
it.
education too, like you said
A lot of
earlier. You know,
education, a lot
educating
of
people
organizing, yeah.
on these issues is
But
incredibly important.
always
That's
remember,
why we're here.
yeah, there's way more of us than there
Yep.
is of them. That's always the thing. There's way more, and there's good people getting into power now, like AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashid Tlaib, Jamal Bowman. Like there are positive changes, and they're coming from younger minorities typically because they know how bad it is.
Exactly, because they've seen the structure, the worst parts
Mm-hmm.
of the structures and the institutions that we have.
Like imagine like
because they're most disproportionately affected.
This is a pipe dream, of course, but imagine like in, let's say, 3 years, there would be a general strike across the United States where 80% of the workforce in all fields would strike. Imagine the impact that would have. Imagine the change that would push. Like you're saying, like, oh, but that'll never happen. BLM last summer. Look at that. Look at how many people went out. Yeah. Look at how many people mobilized to protest for BLM.
Yeah.
So many people mobilized.
I think it was over 1 million in totality over the course of like 2 weeks. It was like over like the first.
But if you look at the whole
weeks,
summer, it's even more. Like people
even more than that.
Can mobilize. It's difficult. It's absolutely difficult. I'm not saying this is. 100%. I'm not saying this is easy. It's a shit ton of work and it's really difficult. And what the right strategy is, I'm not an expert on that. I'm a political streamer. I don't know that shit. But it is possible. What I know that it can be done. Revolutions have happened in the past.
Yeah. Yeah. Like it absolutely can.
Like remember, we're not at the end of history.
Hello, you cutie.
There's this perception that we tend to have that we're at the end of history. All the big things have happened in the past. And now we just got to vibe and deal with whatever is happening now. It's happening now. No, we are in the midst of history. Like what's happening now might have like great consequences down the line in 100 years. We don't know. But like we had one of the most monumental pandemics in our history. Now this is like literally history book shit. And we're not at the end of history. We can make change. We can support each other, and we can bring forth, positive change.
Yeah, exactly. And follow-up question from my chat, pessimism. Do we feel that education is still possible? Political ideologies have become so radicalized. As much as we can suggest Bertie and AOC are popularizing progressive ideas, it feels like it's polarizing just as many in the other direction.
Oh, for sure. That is, extreme times tend to polarize in all directions. Absolutely.
Right.
But there's a very leftism in general is growing on. Like if you look at social media, there's more people talking about it, posting about it. So these times will polarize people, regardless. People will get polarized due to, late stage capitalism, them not earning a lot of money, noticing how the system is failing them, or because of COVID. It will polarize people, but we have a chance to polarize them in our direction. We have a chance to, share content that we find is pushing for the right thing, promote creators that push the right thing. I mean, hell, one of the biggest streamers on this platform is a leftist political streamer that streams like news 2 to 5 hours a day from a leftist perspective. He's one of the biggest creators on this platform. Like, it's not nothing. He has like 20 to 30,000 viewers every day. And during like the big things like the presidential election, he had like 150,000 viewers.
It was crazy.
Yeah. So
it is heartening.
It is. And to be honest, probably like the big governmental socialist kind of changes, they're not going to come from the West. Like, let's be real. It's very unlikely.
Yeah.
They're probably going to come from the global South, Latin America, Africa, Southeast Asia.
These developing areas. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which the U.S. has sabotaged for a long time.
Oh yeah, I saw your TikTok. That was a great TikTok.
Just Google like Latin American countries U.S. has cooed, and then look at that map, and it's like six countries that the U.S. has not allegedly tried to coup in Latin America. It's
like the the old what was it called Animaniacs skit
Yeah.
where it's like it like shows like all the countries, like he's like listing all the countries off.
Yeah. What are the
It's absurd.
points? What other points do we have?
So we've been talking a lot about employers unionizing to democratize the workplace, giving people benefits by democratization and splitting the power up. Benefits, healthcare. Healthcare is tied to employment in the United States. 100% tied to employment, tied directly to employment. You don't work for someone who provides you healthcare. Good luck getting it. You are going to have to pay for it, and it is absurdly expensive. How the hell do we not have socialized healthcare? What does it look like in places like Sweden and Finland, and why can't we do it?
Well, to use a Twitch term, it's pog as fuck here in the Nordics. No, it's really good. Socialized healthcare is great. Like, it is not perfect, but I think it is great. Like, I can go to a doctor and it's like $25 for a visit.
Yep.
To a doctor.
That's what it is here. It's like usually like 35 to 40, which is more expensive, 35 to 40, but that's with on top of paying for your healthcare of
I don't pay anything for
minimum
that.
a couple
extra.
Exactly.
I don't pay anything extra for that. It's just 25 that I go. I mean, of course I pay through taxing, but I go there and then they send me a bill for like $25 and I'm like, oh, cool, thanks. And then if I need to see a specialist, then I go and it's usually the same amount. I don't have to pay anything crazy. Here's like a good one, like that really puts it into perspective. So giving birth in the United States, really expensive, right?
Yep.
Chat. I'm gonna shock chat because I have a lot of Finnish people here.
Fondue giving birth live on stream. Are you gonna give birth right now to prove it to me?
I'm gonna give birth right now on stream.
He's gonna blow. Cooper stream.
Is it TOS? Who knows?
I mean,
as long as I don't,
the camera angle is right.
Yeah, as long as I don't show my bits, then I guess not.
This is the most progressive baby ever born.
Nolly said giving birth to some facts. That's true though. But so in the US, average like if you give birth, go to the hospital, etc., it's like over $10,000. This will be extremely shocking to Europeans. Like, Europeans are like, what? The average in Finland is $300.
You said, I'm sorry, I peeked at chat. You said that's the average of healthcare costs per year.
No, for giving birth.
Oh, for giving birth. I'm sorry, for giving birth.
Yeah, it's $300.
I could adopt a dog for more expensive than that in the United States. I literally, I think it would cost me like $500 to get a purebred German Shepherd.
Yeah. And like absurd. This is on top of like you have maternity leave before that. You get like a package from the government that has like
I've seen that before.
The box and stuff. Like it's very epitomous. But yeah, so like that's a great example of like this thing doesn't need to cost that much. Like it doesn't. It's cheap here. And it can be cheap there. It's doable. There's a very simple reason why it's expensive in the United States. It's because the healthcare and insurance industries don't want it.
Yep. 100%.
It is because these industries are driven by profit. And that's a big problem. Because their first and foremost job is not caring for people and healing them. Their number one priority is how can we make as much money as possible? Which you might see that there's a slight conflict there in when you're supposed to be helping and healing people. And they, of course, lobby very, very hard to make sure that the system remains what it is. Like, that's honestly what it is. But, like, socialized healthcare it's popular. Like, 63% of US adults say that the government has the responsibility to provide healthcare coverage for all. Like, it's a very popular position. Very popular. It's not like people don't want this. People do want this. Of course, there's still argument. People are like, but people want this. This is a popular thing. It's not happening because people don't want it. It's happening because the companies that run the healthcare industry and the insurance industry, they don't want it because they would lose a lot of money.
Exactly. So there's this popular art. Go ahead.
Yeah, and the sad thing is, we're not even getting better healthcare in the U.S. No, that's the sad thing. Like, the U.S. spends more on healthcare as a share of the economy, nearly twice as much as the average OECD nation, and yet has the lowest life expectancy and highest suicide rate.
Right. Right.
Like
Right.
you're paying more and you're getting worse for it. Like it's just, it doesn't add up.
Exactly.
And like again, you mean to tell me that Canada can do it, but you can't? Fucking
Right.
maple leaf on their leaf, and they can do it. They can do it, and you can't.
I didn't say it. I didn't say it. I didn't say it.
I'm just trying to rile up like nationalism, because some people will be like nationalism, and it's like, okay, here's a nationalist play point for you. How can they do it and you can't?
Right. There you go. There you go. Exactly. Yeah. And so Kay just brought up it, kind of the argument that I'm thinking, there's the traditional argument that like, oh, it's going to bring down the cost of care, and like, or not the cost, it's going to bring down the quality.
Oh yeah,
of care.
It will.
It's going to bring down the quality of care, which I think we've seen.
Yeah.
You see across the world is not, seems
Let's
to not
talk
be the case.
about that.
But kind of expounding on that and making it a little bit more, I think, good faith is there's an interesting argument about universal healthcare often leaving behind those that need accessible healthcare the most: disabled, chronically ill, impoverished communities. So with socialized healthcare, how do you prevent things like that from happening?
Enough funding. Honestly, like most of the problems that socialized healthcare has is lack of funding. That's mostly what it boils down to. Like if you're like, oh, there's long wait times. Well, why is there long wait times? Because they can't hire more people.
Right.
Like usual, or conversely, there aren't enough people, and we don't have enough money to train people. It's usually a case of funding. And that's like the main issue, because like studies find that like there's no supported claim that the private sector is more efficient, accountable, or medically effective than the private sector. Like that hasn't been found. And most evidence suggests that public hospitals in Europe are at least as efficient or more efficient than private hospitals. So whenever you hear these complaints of like, well, we'll have longer wait times, the quality will be lower, it's funding. Of course it will be bad if you don't fund it well. Like, obviously. Like, if you don't fund something well, it will suck. It's like not rocket science.
Exactly. I mean, then the argument for this is, well, it's going to make our taxes go up.
It'll make taxes go up for some people who are rich people.
And even if the taxes went up somewhat significantly for the middle class, let's say in the United States, the amount that taxes would go up for us each individually, and I don't have stats to back this up, so I'm just saying this from conjecture, but it just makes sense, would ultimately, I think, be significantly less than what you would be paying for healthcare. If I were to get into a car accident right now and I would have a serious injury, probably cost me $20,000 for hospital care, depending on the severity of it.
It's disgusting.
If I got taxed 10% of my income, it would take me 10 years to pay that amount over the course of 10 years in taxes. So it is much more in our interest to pay, if it were to happen, and this is, again, this is not even the proper way to approach it, but even if taxes were raised on the middle class and that was the way that we did it, it would be less out-of-pocket cost for us than it would be to just be skirting along paying health insurance or having no insurance and getting an injury and having to pay for it.
Absolutely. And like this is the problem with like that we have in Europe, is that right-wing governments will put in austerity measures and they'll cut funding from public health care, and then they'll say, well, look at how inefficient the public health sector is. We need the private sector to come in. We need them to come in. Of course it's inefficient because you cut money from it, you fuckers.
Exactly. That's what Kava just said in my chat. They said in the UK, the Conservative Party will cut the NHS and they complain about the NHS for political gain.
They set it up for failure, and then they can bring in the private companies and they can get money from that. It's a complete like setup. They shoot the runner in the foot and say this runner is doing like shit, and it's like, yeah, you shot the runner in the foot. Of course the runner can't run. What the fuck are you talking about? And then like they want to make it like the US where it's money driven, but healthcare should not be profit driven. Like in my opinion, there should be no private sector when it comes to healthcare.
No, it's just a matter of morality at that point.
This is my opinion, because it's not a question of like, should I go get healthcare? No, it's kind of a question of like, I need healthcare.
Right. One of my favorite, and I don't think this is a common argument against good faith debaters, but one of my favorite arguments about socialized healthcare is when people are like, well, people are going to go to the doctor more. And it's like, what do
And
you mean? Like, and on top, like, I don't just go to the doctor for shits, dude. I'm not gonna go sit at the doctor for an hour and a half just to, hey, I can't wait for them to put the tongue depressor on. It just really gets me going. I love it.
and
It's my favorite thing to do on a
and
Saturday.
Americans go less to the doctor than like comparable OECD nations because it costs a
Yeah,
lot.
it
And
costs money.
you know what that leads to? It leads to less diseases and less problems being prevented early, and it
Yes.
decreases the life expectancy of American people. So if they
Exactly.
go more,
Yeah.
their life expectancy will go up and people will be healthier because they can
Exactly.
capture problems earlier.
And that costs healthcare more because if people are healthier,
Yep.
you don't have to. Like it. So yeah, it 100%. It needs to be a transition. I don't know how we do it though. I don't know. Aside from,
Yeah.
I think the way that it has to happen is, like you said, just education and voting people into power who
Yep.
won't be as receptive to the qualms of the private healthcare sector.
Mhm.
But and obviously specifically insurance. But I think
Luckily,
I don't know how long the process is going to be.
yeah, that's where the some leftists are like revolution, let's overthrow the government, yada yada, radical action. Some are like we need to do it slower. I don't know what the right option there is, honestly. Both have their problems and both have their merits.
I think the COVID testing and vaccines for free was a good start. Yeah, for sure. That was a clear example of, hey, it works. It took like a month for me to get the vaccine. When 80% of the US population, hundreds of millions of people, were trying to get it. So that is proof right there. That is proof right there that me trying to go get my foot fungus removed or whatever is probably not going to be a problem under socialized healthcare, because there are not going to be nearly as many people going for that exact procedure. And no, wait times are not going to be insane for something like that. It just
And
the
they
demand
only
is not
will
that
if the
high.
funding is not there. That's the thing.
And if exactly,
that's the problem we have in Finland, where like, oh, there's long wait times in like these small areas because they don't have funding. They can't do. What are you gonna do? You
exactly. And
those needs to be like robustly funded. Are they going to be somewhat inefficient and spend more money than they probably should? Probably, but that's okay. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's
And
necessary.
And if I look at this past year, not just the the vaccines being free and the testing being free, but if I look at the stimulus checks that we received, things like that, my taxes didn't go up. I make a lower middle class wage. My taxes didn't go up. What is there to be scared of? There's nothing to be scared of. Your taxes are not going up to fund this. They can fund it. They just proved they can fund it. So what are we scared of?
Look at how much money they put in the military in the US. Like,
Yep.
and they that money comes up like this. There's never a question in the United States like political landscape, where are we going to find money for the US Army? That money will appear, no fucking problems. Then they're like, oh, but healthcare, where do we get the money? Bitch, shut up. Like, that money exists.
Yeah, if we spent a quarter of that on healthcare, just wow. Yeah, like 934 billion from looking at the balance, citing the Department of Defense. 705 billion outlined by the Department of Defense alone. 705 billion.
Yeah, next one. That was in 2020. It was 778 billion. That was the spending. The next country in the list on spending is China at 252 billion.
A third, basically.
Yeah. That's the next one. And then the next one after that is India at 72.9. Like, the US military spending is so preposterously huge that could easily be cut, and then get all those US military bases out of around the world, because the US has a crazy amount of military bases around the world.
Yep.
And then then use that money for other important things.
Exactly, which leads to other things like housing, for example, affordable housing. Programs like like we were talking about UBI earlier, UBI or welfare or food stamps or whatever, to properly fund these programs that are people will complain about not working and not being effective because they're underfunded. Like you said, it's a problem of funding. People will complain, welfare has all these hurdles to get through, and it's a valid complaint. Actually, welfare has a ton of hurdles to get through, and it will actually discourage people from working more hours at a job, not because they're lazy, but because if they make a certain amount over a threshold, they'll lose their welfare benefits and ultimately make less. The reason that those that those factors are in place is because welfare cannot afford to pay what it needs to actually pay to ensure the welfare of people, because
Yeah.
it is underfunded. Why is it underfunded? Because because of what we just talked about. The
Yeah.
United States budget is fucked.
Speaking of the impoverished, that's the next topic actually that we had. We can jump to that one quite naturally
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
So like, what can we do to help poor people? Well, paying jobs. That's the
Yep.
first one. Raise the
Yep.
minimum wage. That's going to help poor people a lot. If you say to everyone, like the poor people who are making $7.25, starting next year your salary will be doubled. Like that literally will change their life.
Yeah.
That will be
Yeah.
life changing for people.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
absolutely life changing for people. But on top of that, having strong social safety nets, unemployment benefit,
yes,
food stamps, Medicaid, because if those are not good, then they become poorer and poorer, and they become indebted even more because they have to go to the hospital. Oh, here's 20K debt now. Fuck. Now you're in the hole.
Exactly. And people will have the complaint, well, if we get these strong safety nets, people aren't going to work. So let's imagine that we raise the price, we raise the price, we raise the pay for most jobs across the United States. We raise minimum wage, and we also implement these social safety nets. People are not disposed to inactivity, right? There's this narrative that people are lazy, people are naturally lazy. When have you ever seen the majority of people tend to not do things, to not do something, even someone who you would consider to be a quote unquote lazy person who sits at home and plays video games all day? They are playing a game which gives them fulfillment, that they have a stake in, that gives them that idea. If you can make a job provide that same fulfillment through things like co-ops, things like better pay, they are going to find that same fulfillment, and they are going to want to work. The natural tendency and natural intuition of humanity is not like I said, not in activity. So I just think it's just a bad argument.
And again, there's also like research on UBI trials in different countries and different times. They have not found that. They have not found that people don't work. They
exactly
has not been found. Also, on top, like other stuff that can help poor people is paid time off, so sick leave, family leave to deal with stuff. And because if you have sick leave and you have a good healthcare system, that means that people can properly heal from whatever sickness they have, and they can be more healthier rather than spiral into this worse and worse situation. And then high quality education for children, because the US education system is not good. So having high quality education helps a lot.
Yep.
Ending mass incarceration, that would help a lot. And then when the people who come out of incarceration, reintegration is super important, because there's some like getting a job is like so difficult if you're an ex-con. Like, yeah,
absolutely.
And then ending the poverty tax, because if you're rich, you can do stuff like buying things in bulk, which if you're rich saves you money, but if you're poor, you can't afford that. You can't buy stuff in bulk. That's not an option for you. So you have to pay more for things, and you have to go to poor area convenience stores, which are more expensive.
Yep. 100%. Yeah, and that the local, you raise a good point. If people are lazy, I also don't think they should die. Fuck yeah. Because laziness is also probably a result of something else. It's probably a result of depression, which again is probably a result, whether it's clinical or whether it's induced by the desperation of a person's current situation. If a person is again unfulfilled in labor, or is able to find any labor that makes them fulfilled, or do anything that makes them fulfilled because they don't have the means to purchase things that would allow them to do things that make them feel fulfilled, or have transportation to get to places which would make them feel fulfilled, then of course, they're probably going to be quote unquote lazy because they're fucking depressed and desperate, right?
If your argument is that people are inherently lazy, prove it. Show me the data.
Yeah,
not your well everyone knows. Well, I have a friend. No, I don't want that bullshit. I want research, peer-reviewed research that has been studied through long periods of time that shows that people are inherently lazy. You won't be able to give me that. You won't.
Exactly. No, you're not going to, because it's just not true. Yeah. No.
And this brings us to like homelessness, I guess, which is a huge problem in the US.
Yes,
Which
which is
Turpini mentioned that the feeling when almost half of the homeless in the U.S. are actually employed.
that I didn't know that stat. That's insane.
Turpini, do you have a source for that stat? I would love to see the source for that.
That's insane.
But I believe it, but I would love to have a source to back that up. But actually, what we should do, instead of saying homeless, we should use the term unhoused. We should shift to that. And I'm not trying to be like bad. No, I'm trying to say like
no.
We should like culturally shift to that because
language is important.
It describes their situation, and it describes what has been done to them.
Right.
Because they didn't magically become homeless. Someone said, "You can no longer live here. You must leave, or people will forcibly take you out of here." They have been unhoused. And because they still have a home, the city or the state that they're in, that's still their home. Like, that didn't change. But they just don't have a house. And sorry?
Oh, sorry. I was just addressing what someone in my chat said. Do you have any studies that show people are inherently motivated as opposed to inherently lazy? And I was referencing probably the UBI studies that you've been talking about, right? People in the countries that have trialed UBI, not directly saying these people are motivated, not lazy, but it indirectly is by giving people the means to survive, and not showing that productivity is not necessarily dipped.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I know Fondue has a link to that, and that's something that I will send to the Discord afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to look. Thanks for the source.
Sorry to cut you off, by the way.
No. I was just looking at a source from Turpini, but I don't have the time right now to read through it because there's a lot of text. But thanks, Turpini. But yeah, like the main reason for homelessness or unhoused people in the U.S. is lack of affordable housing. Like, number one, that's one of the main reasons. Then there are other reasons like zoning laws and the cost of developing and stuff like that. But like affordable housing, like reasons cited for homelessness in the 2019 survey commissioned by the city of San Francisco include job loss, 26%, alcohol drug use, 18%, eviction, 13%, argument/actually by friend family, 12%, mental health issues, 8%, divorce, separation, 5%. In September, the Council of Economic Advisors released a report in which they stated the deregulation of the housing markets would reduce homelessness in some of the most constrained markets by an estimate of 54% in San Francisco, 40% in Los Angeles, 38% in San Diego, because rents would fall by 55%, 41%, and 39% respectively. So in the West Coast, the reason is because it's so fucking expensive to live. Like the median rent in big cities like LA, San Francisco, and New York is like $2,500 a month for a single room apartment.
Insane. It is
if you're working minimum wage, how the fuck are you going to pay that kind of rent?
Right. Exactly. Do you think that's a result of the, I guess the argument against that would be like, well, just so many people live there. How do you make housing less expensive? How does that happen?
It's publicly funded. That's how.
Yeah.
You decommodify it. I'll get to that in a bit. Didn't I put it? Oh no, it's in the housing part. Yeah, I'm gonna get to that in a bit. But yeah, also like because people are like, oh well, the homeless are actually like they come from outside. Not really, no. Like 70% of homeless people in San Francisco in 2019 reported becoming homeless while living in San Francisco. 22% came from another county within California, and only 8% came from another state. So they are from that area. There are people who are from those areas. Sorry, here's the quote from Turpini. Around 44% of homeless people were employed, according to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's 2008 annual homeless assessment report. The most common demographic feature of all sheltered homeless people are male members of minority groups older than age 31 and alone. Damn. That's fucked.
That's so crazy. 44%. Was that, I'm sorry, did you say that was in the U.S. or just in San Francisco?
In the U.S.
In the U.S. What the fuck?
That's go ahead. Thank you for the sub. Much appreciated. But yeah, because like imagine this situation. So you become unhoused. Okay, you're unhoused now because you couldn't pay rent, for example. Because like let's say that's it, or you have a drug problem, or you have mental health issues.
It kind of disappoints me that they separate. I mean, it makes sense.
How do you dig yourself out of that hole? Because you couldn't afford to pay to begin with. So how are you going to have extra money now all of a sudden to pay for more of that? And then on top of that, if you don't have a job, then how do you get a job? Because You have no access to showers. You have no access to clean clothes. You have no access to toilets. How can you go into job interviews and be like presenting yourself in any meaningful manner? And then on top of that, if you have a drug addiction or serious mental health issue, what support do you have? Where do you get support? Where do you get help? Because if you have like schizophrenia and like a meth addiction and you're on the streets, how the fuck are you supposed to get out of there?
Right.
It's impossible.
There is no way.
There's almost no way. Like the game is stacked against you in such a way that is just unimaginably difficult.
You can't get healthcare. You cannot get housing.
What do you do?
What are you gonna do?
Fucked.
What do you do? And on top of that, you're not in the position to go on this intense search on the internet for help to find affordable ways to get around the system, right? You can't do that. You can't do it.
Yeah. So then, housing. What do we do? What do we do about the housing? Well, raising a minimum wage would help, because then people can pay for housing better.
Exactly.
Universal basic income could also help, because if you have like, let's say, $1,500 every month that you get from the government, your rent is going to be a lot cheaper for you, because you're working on top of that. Like, that money doesn't go away depending on your salary. You just get it. Like, it's non-conditional. So the pressure is off of you already a lot. And like, what's the percentage of people that live like paycheck to paycheck in the US? It's like an insane amount of people.
It's absurd. It's super, super high. Let's see. I can look it up.
I'm also looking it up. Let's see who's first. It is
78% is the first one I see from Forbes, but then I also see
63% is
three
so
from
we can
CNBC.
we can say roughly 2/3. Roughly 2/3 of Americans currently are living paycheck to paycheck, meaning if there was like an extra $400 bill, they could not afford it.
Yep.
Like, just how fucked is like that whole situation where and the stress that you must have knowing that you're just barely making it every month, and one small thing can destroy your life and your family's life.
It's crazy how thin the line between being unhoused and housed is. It's like you're one accident away from possibly being unhoused and injured on top of that.
Yeah. And also, people's buying power is stagnated throughout the years, but housing prices have continued to rise. So there's that gap as well. Like, your buying power isn't growing, but the prices are growing, so it's becoming more expensive, relatively speaking. And like, people spend a huge amount of their income on rent. 95% of all U.S. counties can't afford a single bedroom rental on minimum wage.
95. That is upset, and that's full-time minimum wage work. 40 hours a week. That's absurd.
Yeah,
it's absurd.
And the main
so you said
go ahead. Yeah, I was saying that the main issue is that we treat housing as a consumer product, not a human right. In other words, this means that the main objective of developers and landlord is not housing people; it's turning a profit. And again, this is the perverted priority here. It shouldn't be this way around. Profit should be secondary. The main point should be housing people. And making houses for rich people, a lot more profitable than making houses for poor people.
Yep.
So there's no profit incentive for developing housing for poor people. This doesn't make sense. Not good business, you see. But then you're like, well, then all the houses will look the same and everyone will be living in gray boxes and blah, blah, blah. No, you are wrong, because I have an actual example of this where this did not happen. In Vienna, in Austria, they started a public housing project in 1923. So it was financed by taxes on the rich. Hello. And the housing was meant for working people. But these houses were not drab, poor quality. They were nice, leafy courtyards, a lot of natural light. They had, like, in the same building, like common laundry rooms, grocery stores, pharmacies, swimming pools, and much, much more.
I'm looking at like pictures of it right now, and it looks gorgeous. I'm like looking at this like a condominium style place with a giant park in the middle.
Yeah, they were built to be beautiful on the outside and the inside. That was their whole point. They were supposed to be pleasant, and they built a sense of community because you liked living where you were. It was your home, your people there. And the best part about this is that it didn't cost much. So the homes were actually on average 4% of your monthly wage. 4%. Okay, that's an easy ban. Anti-Semitism.
Oh yeah. Just like,
That was
cool,
an easy
automate,
one.
cool, see ya. Easy.
No, I was talking about the Rothschilds.
Oh,
Yeah, that's an easy anti-Semitism there.
yeah, you love to see the random shadow actor that I hate because they look different than me, so they're
Mm.
bad.
But yeah, anyway, like just imagine now if you with your current salary, like listen, viewer, chatter, whatever, if your current salary, like after taxes, if only 4% of your salary was your rent, how much more money you would have. You have
Can't
had
even
so much more money.
imagine.
You have so much more money to just spend on so many other things. You could do so much more. And even today, because like that project ended when the fascists took over Vienna, but that stuff still remains for up to today. Like today, 62% of people in Vienna live in social housing.
Right.
To this day, and the
That's
average
crazy.
the average rent in Vienna is $400 to $600 per month.
Wild. It's wild.
So this is
it's
doable,
wild.
but again, there's no profit motive for this.
Right. Right. And it's the thing with housing is obviously housing requires, obviously housing requires maintenance, but housing lasts years and years and years. So like you said, it wasn't that expensive, and it's not that expensive to fund public housing like this.
I mean,
it does not need to be whatsoever.
Of course, it requires money. Yeah, like building housing is not cheap. Like it's a lot of material and building, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But
Upfront, of
it's
course.
doable. It can be done.
Yes.
Tax the rich. They're a great source of income. Taxing
Exactly.
the rich, ooh, such a good source of income. Because you know what the rich have? They have a lot of money. So if you tax a lot, you get a lot. Funny, because the working class don't have that much money. So you need to, like, taxing them is not that smart. But rich people, ooh, they have a lot of money. So, just tax the shit out of them.
Devil's advocate voice. Someone in chat. I had to spend this amount of money in my house and suffer. So why should there be nice, affordable housing for others? How do I get a nicer house? If I want a nicer house, how do I? If with affordable with public, if all housing is public, how do I get a nicer house if I have more money or if I have the means to buy it?
So you are assuming here that most housing is not nice, and that is the assumption that is not true. Most housing will be nice. That's the thing. Because great effort is put into having as much public housing as possible and focus on making it beautiful inside and outside, then most housing will be nice. There'll just be different types of housing. Of course, if you have a family of like 5, you'll have access to different kind of housing than, a single person like me.
Of course. Right. Sure.
Like,
of course.
There will be differences based on that. And of course, different areas will have bigger housing. For example, if you live in more rural areas, you can have bigger housing.
Right. Yeah.
So then that's how you could. Then the option could be, okay, you can have a bigger house. You just need to move a little bit further.
Here. Yeah. And that would honestly probably help with the problem of how, at least in the United States, how there's a huge issue of in some areas, obviously, a couple of things. Highly concentrated populations in single areas, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but when it's excessive to the point where housing isn't available, obviously that's a problem. But also it would hopefully help with the issue of there being such a cultural divide between rural America versus urban America. If you have incentives for people to move out into more rural areas, hey, you get more house, you get this, yada yada. You are probably going to get a more diverse group of people living there and a more rich and culturally rich environment out there, which I think is really interesting. And that's I didn't know that about Vienna. So that's a really interesting. It's so cool because we are so shielded from these examples in America. You don't see them. You hear about, Nordic countries have done it pretty well, socialized healthcare, this and that and that.
We have social,
but you don't really know
that.
Yeah, and you don't really know, but we don't get to see it, right? We don't unless we really dig for it. So it's interesting to be exposed to this and be exposed to real life world examples of modern social programs like this working. Because obviously the thing that we hear all the time is, well, it didn't work in the USSR.
Yeah, because that's the only
Yeah,
place where it's ever been tried. Yeah,
where any kind of social programs like this have ever been tried and implemented. We don't hear
and
about these because they work.
and you know what? Like the funny thing about the USSR is a lot of ex-Soviet countries, like a majority of people, are nostalgic for the Soviet times.
I
Just
was
funny.
watching there's a guy named Bald and Bankrupt on
Mm.
YouTube, and he'll visit like Kyrgyzstan, for example, and he went to a couple of cities, like big cities in Kyrgyzstan, and he was talking to people there, and they were he was asking them, he's like, hey, if older people, he was like, do you feel like your city is better now,
Mm.
or was it better when it was a part of the USSR? And they'll say quality of living here at the very least was better. It was,
Mm.
and things have degraded ever since. Not to obviously, I'm not praising, everything of
No,
the
no, no, no.
USSR.
That's not the
No,
point.
which is that's not, but that's not the point. It's
No.
like the same thing as saying like that doesn't mean we can't acknowledge things that worked,
Yeah, exactly.
and improve upon them, right?
Absolutely. I think those were all the points.
Yeah, those are the points that I had come up with. I
Mm-hmm.
think you gave some great answers. I don't know if you had anything else specifically, any other
Nope.
topics
I'm
that you could think of off the top of your
I'm
head.
good. I covered everything I wanted. I used all my sources. This was really fun. I really
This,
enjoyed this. I hope
dude, this has been awesome.
chat. I hope you enjoyed this. Here's a link to the document that I had all my points in. I posted it in my chat. I'll give it to you as well, Crub.
Perfect.
And
I'll throw my Discord and post here.
yeah, so all of the data points there are annotated. So at the bottom you can see all the sources, and you can go to them if you need to. Not the most academic sourcing type, but some kind of sourcing type.
Sure, of course. Still, yeah, still sources available. Yeah, I never claim to, we never claim to be experts on this. Yeah,
No,
the absolute
I'm
experts,
I'm not a political expert.
but
I
you
just
don't
want a
have
better
to be.
world.
Yeah, you don't have to be. You don't
No,
have to be to understand this, and that's another thing is gatekeeping knowledge like that is obviously we need experts. We need people who put
absolutely.
a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah,
time and
yeah.
research into things. But at the same time, knowledge should be accessible, and knowledge
Yep.
should be. You shouldn't consider yourself unable to participate in the systems that uh, determine how you live your life
Yeah.
because you're not an expert on something. Because I feel that way sometimes myself.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't really want to talk about this stuff too much because I don't know too much. I want something
Hmm.
stupid. But no, I should. These systems directly impact how I live, how the people that I love live, how the people that are in my community live.
Yeah.
I should say something. And if I'm wrong, and if that's wrong, people should push back. Sure. Absolutely. But I should be able to talk about it. And so should everyone else. Everyone else should have the power for that.
Hmm. Club was saying, to be honest, majority of politicians aren't exactly political experts either. Yeah, I mean, look at Marjorie Taylor Greene or
Jesus
Boulevard.
Christ, man. Or fucking what's his name? The dude that is going to jail for running a sex ring. I forgot his name.
Matt Gates,
Matt Gates.
allegedly,
Matt
allegedly,
Gates, yeah. Allegedly, of course, in Minecraft,
allegedly,
yeah.
allegedly.
Of course. I had a couple more questions from my chat. Hey, that's good.
Mhm. Yeah, go for it.
Unless you got you
Yeah,
got to
no,
run or
go for it.
anything,
No, no,
you're good
no,
on
no, it's
time.
good.
Okay, for sure. For democracy to thrive, it depends on informed participants. This necessitates availability and free flow of information. However, in recent years, we see a rise of fake news and biased spins to push agendas. How do you reconcile with the desire for democratized systems when increasing falsehoods are informing decisions? Garbage in, garbage out.
That's a really
Good question.
difficult question.
It's a hard question.
And I don't have the answer to that. Honestly, I don't.
Yeah.
Especially because like we're living in a new age where information is so readily available and so widely distributable in such a fashion that has never existed before, and the volume of information is also so large that it's a really difficult topic. I
Yeah.
don't know how to solve that. Like it's like
Yeah.
that's what we're trying to figure out right now. Like QAnon is a great example of like
Yep.
misinformation that has basically caused a cult to form.
Yeah, exactly. And it's
Online
hard to find
cult.
the balance of not gatekeeping information just to these higher institutions that
Yes.
say exactly what should be credible, but also not dropping it to any bullshit organization like
Yes.
QAnon and
Exactly.
have the power to push a false narrative like
Yeah.
that so intensely that it gains validity with a lot of people.
Probably something. Yeah, it's really hard
It's
because
hard. I don't even know
like
that we can address it.
we
'Cause it's
don't
just,
want like I don't want a situation like China where like the internet is highly monitored and like
of
you can't
course,
say certain things. Like I don't want that, but I don't want people also spreading QAnon bullshit around and dangerous information like that. So it's finding a balance. It's really hard, and
it's a difficult balance.
it's a really difficult balance. Maybe some part of it is breaking up those big tech companies so that they don't have that kind of power and then nationalizing them. Maybe I don't know.
Right. Right.
uh, I don't know. It's so fucking hard.
It is. It is. And then we had another question from Chad. Can we talk about billionaire philanthropy being bullshit?
It is bullshit. Yeah, big
It
or
complete.
yeah, big philanthropy is an absolute bullshit thing because like Bill Gates on record has said, like he was asked like, would you run for government? And he said, no. Why would I run for government? I have way more power being a philanthropist than I would ever as a politician, and there's no term limit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, does philanthropy help the world? Sure. Yeah, it does.
Of course.
It can
Of
help
course.
the world, absolutely. But I don't think that one person should have that kind of power then that comes with it because they give so much money, they get to make decisions on really like world altering things, and I don't think they should have that kind of power.
Yeah, if I give 100 billion to a developing nation hey, that's close to their GDP. That is way too much power. That is way too much responsibility. If if really their lifeline depends on my philanthropy, that is horrifying.
Yeah,
It's
they
horrifying,
become dependent
honestly.
of you, and then you have like really like this one person is like, now I'm gonna decide what the healthcare system of this one country is, and like, why should they have that kind of power? Like, why?
Yeah.
Because they have a lot of money that they stole from people. Yeah, no.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
yes, I highly agree. Like, philanthropy is mostly just like, and it's also used as a way to avoid taxes because you pump your money into your philanthropy organization, then you don't have to pay taxes for it, and yada yada yada.
Yep, exactly. There are so many issues that come alongside it where it's not just they're not just a nice person. They're
No,
not just a nice
no,
person.
they
There
don't.
are
They don't do
much
it
better.
for fun. I mean, they might
Yeah,
have some like generally like want to better the world type of goals.
Sure.
But again,
That doesn't mean they don't take advantage of the other benefits that come
yeah,
alongside that,
and
or
I
that
don't
we
think
just to the government to give to these other to
Yeah, exactly.
reinvest.
Like
Which
we
they
might
don't do.
have like a benevolent emperor, but I don't think we should still have emperors.
Exactly. Right.
Like,
Exactly.
I don't think we should have emperors, even if the emperor was benevolent. I don't care. I don't want to have
Yeah.
emperors.
Exactly. It's a power thing. It's not a personal thing.
No.
It's just an issue with being
Yeah.
in that position of authority.
For
right.
me, like a very important thing is like analyzing, I guess, hierarchies and like kind of trying to figure out if they're just or not, and they should prove themselves to be just, like regularly, like the police, for
Right.
example. Currently an unjust hierarchy, and they should be put to prove their justness because there's some of that needed. But
Yeah, for accountability.
but Musk senpai would treat me so well on Mars. Yeah, sure would.
Yeah. If we were just on Mars with Musk,
no laws,
no laws, just libertarian paradise, no driver license, it would be great.
It's always fun to talk about libertarianism because the logical endpoint of libertarianism is neo-feudalism. It's just a new sort of feudalism where everything is controlled by like a few big companies, and then they fight for territory. Like, it'll just be feudalism. That's all it will lead to.
It would eventually spiral out of control into,
because you're like, well, I would protect my property, and it's like, you would protect your property from Amazon, who owns 1/3 of the United States and has an army. How the fuck your little farm gonna defend against Amazon's army?
Bunch of little, like, they got like the smile helmets on, just like marching with their guns.
They will steamroll over you and say, now this belongs to Amazon Corp. Welcome to the family, bitch.
Oh god, thinking about branded armies is putting in incredible images in my head. Just oh my god. But yeah, that's absolutely true. Oh Lord, dude.
I think I'm gonna move on now. This has been a super great talk, by the way, but I want to get to some GeoGuessr.
Dude, I'm playing I'm about to go play some GeoGuessr too.
So I haven't played it before, so I'm excited.
Oh, dude, go for! I recommend to gotta get used to the game. You can do the normal mode. Highly recommend Country Streak though. Country Streak is a really
that's what
good
I was
time.
looking. I think because that's the one that you've been doing, and I was like, oh, that looks like fun.
Yeah,
Because I don't want to
highly
go for like,
recommend.
which street is this on? Like, I don't fucking know. But country is more
Exactly.
fun.
It's a lot more fun, and you can get through a lot more. And the streaks are a lot of fun.
Hey,
But fondue.
Crub, this was awesome. Let me shout you out in my chat.
Yeah, mods. Can we get a shout out for fondue as well?
Yeah, everyone
Make
go
sure you guys
go
go-
give Crub a follow. I fixed the link now, so it'll actually take you to his stream now.
And you also have YouTube, TikTok. You're very active on YouTube and TikTok.
YouTube.com/funwithfondue. Then TikTok /use. Well, I don't know what the fuck the URL is. I'm Fun with Fondue is there as well. But yeah, I'm active on YouTube. I'll probably put this as a segment on YouTube.
Yeah. Use this for whatever you
cutie.
want. Make sure you mischaracterize me as like
I will
only take the sections of me asking devil's advocate questions and put them in.
And then,
that's
can
all
you
I ask.
believe what he said?
Addressing the CrubTV drama live.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Thumbnail. I already see the thumbnail.
Yeah.
Oh my god, dude. All right, I'm gonna let you go.
Yes.
Thanks again for coming
Thank
on,
you,
dude. This has
Crub.
been a fantastic conversation.
Yeah, this was awesome. Thank you so much.
And we'll be in touch, my guy.
We will. Bye-bye.
All right, bye guys.
Hello there. Thanks a lot for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for future videos. Also, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments below, or you can come visit my stream on Twitch. I stream every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 6 p.m. Central European Time, and I can answer any questions there. We play games there, go through the news, and talk about some leftist politics as well. See you in the next video. Bye!